to say the least. I want to thank the Ryman Hospitalities Corporation for.
And in theory, we should be live. You wanna introduce us, John? This is what you do over here.
Oh, are we on Not Biscuits? Okay.
Yeah. Well, I figured we'd put the political stuff over there,
Sure.
so I could pretend to be like neutral over back on my channel.
Right. Okay. Hello, everyone, and welcome
Oh.
to a
Yeah, it's working.
presidential episode of Those Aren't Biscuits. I'm one of your hosts tonight, Jonathan Cadet, and with me, as always, sitting firmly in the middle of the aisle, Owen Adams. Say hi.
Hi, I am sitting firmly in the middle of the aisle. The vicar is getting quite upset, actually. He's very upset.
Unfortunately, he's in an ongoing plane crash, and everyone's gonna die because they can't get out.
Yeah, I'm really sorry. And to be honest, the plane crash started because everybody got so pissed off because the drinks trolley couldn't get past. I'm gonna post on my Discord server.
I mean, it's really just a plain riot at this point. I do apologize. I am eating, everyone. Kind of busy.
I am eating everyone!
Line up in a single file line, and you'll be eaten.
I have to remember to be quiet. So, hello everybody. For me, it's 2 a.m. I've just turned the sound off. That's great. So I have to not disturb everybody. So, hello everybody. For me, it's... Oh, I've created some double audio. Oh look, it's Melania. Either that or it's the Shredder. Krog! Shredder! Release the Technodrome!
So, okay. We have, what, 8 minutes before this starts? Do you have any wild predictions for what's coming?
Trump will come out and say 9/11 was good, and his fan base, before he's finished saying the sentence, his fan base will be like, no, see, what he meant was that the numbers 9 and 11 add up to 20, which is a good number.
And he'll finish talking going, no, and I specifically mean the terrorist attack that happened in New York City.
What he meant by that was, you know how some people say literally when they mean figuratively? When he said specifically, he meant...
and I know the definition of the difference between figuratively.
We know he doesn't. Did you see the that interview? It's really funny. I don't know if you've been following this story. He did an interview with 60 Minutes where he stormed off.
Yeah.
And he was like, just to show you why I stormed off and what terrible things they were doing to me, I'm going to release the full unedited footage. And it's just 45 minutes of his usual shit. Like, it's just 45 minutes of just garbage and nonsense. And he's like, see? I'm a Trump supporter, can't you tell?
For this evening's debate is Kristen Welker of NBC News.
Thanks.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Hi.
You
wanted the best. You got the best.
Debate. I want to welcome the first.
Hello, Cleveland.
We're so glad and thankful that you are feeling better. I want to welcome the Biden family, Dr. Jill Biden. Thank you all for being here.
My
tonight.
fellow
We're
Armenians.
So excited. We're looking forward to a really robust discussion. And the only thing I would reiterate are the CPD guidelines that when the candidates are talking, please hold any applause or any other...
I love how they have to keep on reminding us not to applaud. No one's applauding this shit.
Look at this weird shirt with like the buttons on little hoops.
This is really the honor of
What a weird look. It doesn't like properly come together. It's an odd look.
Get settled, and the show will start very soon. Thank you for being here.
This is our riveting commentary. We're gonna be
Look at that shirt.
criticizing their fashions.
I wasn't criticizing. I just thought it was an interesting style of buttons. Look, I'm here to give this event.
Come together.
I'm here to give this... I don't know, not like that. It physically doesn't come together as much as a shirt with more traditional buttons. Look, I think we should give this event the respect it deserves, and that's what I'm gonna do.
Oh, way ahead of you, buddy. I have a drink right here.
So, who are you voting for in the election, John? Are you one of those people who's like, I'm not going to tell you who I'm voting for? Votes are confidential for a reason. You went from Biden?
Yeah.
You spent the last 4 years Biden your time?
No, before we get going, I do have a prediction that's going to happen.
Trump's going to open his mouth and just flies will emerge.
And before I conclude tonight, I want to say one thing.
I would like to announce my new Vice President, Imhotep.
Hester, destroyer of oblivion. No, I get the impression that one of them, inspired by AOC's like record-setting Twitch stream the other night, will make a desperate attempt to appeal to the children, but get it horribly wrong. Like Trump's gonna come out like, and if you vote for me, I'll buy every one of you personally the newest console, the Atari.
Look, I am also capable of twitching. Here I go. Spasms.
I heard AOC had a tremendous Twitch the other night. We wish her the best.
I think it'll just come out, right? This is genuinely, I think, my prediction, because we've seen a lot of Trump in debates and stuff, and he does chase, like, the most popular thing, particularly online. So I think he'll just come out naked, all fours. He'll just walk into the middle of the thing and go, meow. And then he'll just lift a leg, like, straight up in the air, like a ballet dancer. And just...
I can has cheeseburger.
And then just exposing himself to the audience. And then the tongue will just come out. I'm grooming. This is how they have their baths. That's my prediction for the day.
I know cats better than anybody.
So, they say that man's best friend is a dog, but I'm man's best friend. President Trump. the Donald. And, if man doesn't want me to be, isn't my best friend in return, they are not coming to my birthday party at the White House with the balloons and the big clown. Hello to Sinister Minister, how you doing? It's our first chatter.
So
it's going to be interesting.
Part of me wants to just watch them come on stage, wave at each other, right? Stare each other down for like 3 minutes, then knock over the podium and just start duking it out. Just, there's all pretenses aside. Like, any other year, I'd be like, okay, that'd be barbaric, that's horrible, that's, not the democratic process at all. This year, fuck it. Just duke it out. Like, each one brings out a sword, and we do it Highlander style,
I think Trump should just go for his best chance of victory and just go 1, 2, 3, 4. I declare a thumb war. Because what's Biden gonna say to that? No. And be a coward?
You know what? Knowing this year and this country, him not agreeing to the thumb war would probably cost him.
CNN's like, yeah, Trump is like a fascist, but what kind of candidate do we put forward who isn't willing to go engage in a thumb war with a fascist?
Right. That sounds like support to me.
And then the headlines will be when Trump said 1, 2, 3, 4, I declare a thumb war was the moment he finally fulfilled the mantle of president.
first presidential action he's ever had.
Finally, he inhabited the role of office as with all the glamour and vigor the office demands.
The European Union has reached out saying they have a vacancy and they would like us to join.
Oh, apparently I'm a little bit loud. I can tweak that down. How's that? Is that better? Hello to August. Sinister Minister says, I've already voted. Awesome.
Nice.
I haven't. I don't get a vote.
Between President Donald J. Trump and former Vice President Joe Biden. Tonight's debate is sponsored by the Commission on Presidential Debates. It is conducted under health and safety
DuPont.
protocols designed
Oh, because I can't hear the debate at all, too. Okay, hold on. Oop.
Here in the hall has promised to remain silent. No
Oh.
cheers, boos,
Click. Ah, stop it.
or other interruptions, except right now, as we welcome to the stage former Vice President Joe Biden and President Donald J. Trump.
Oh.
Oh, Sub-Zero, we meet again.
I'm just like, before either one got to talk, it just interrupts with just like,
Sinister
John
Minister,
Cena!
Sinister Minister says he would say 2468. I use this hand to masturbate.
Major topics at the beginning of each section. Each candidate will have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
You guys just let me know how the volume is. I'll do my best.
The debate commission will then turn on their microphone only when it is their turn to answer, and the commission will turn it off exactly when the 2 minutes have expired. After that, both
Hear that,
microphones
Donald?
will
Hear that?
I'm looking forward to
Half of
this
the
shit.
voters, I'm going to ask you to please
I'm waiting for the other one just to go to the other
goal is
podium.
for you
I
to
wasn't
each other
done.
And for the American people to hear every word of what you both
Okay,
have to say.
keep telling me
And
about the
so with
volume. I'll
that,
keep
if
working
you're
on it as
ready,
I can.
Let's start, and we will begin with the fight against the coronavirus. President Trump, the first question is for you. The country is heading into a dangerous new phase. More than 40,000 Americans are in the hospital tonight with COVID, including record numbers here in Tennessee. And since the two of you last shared a stage, 16,000 Americans have died from COVID. So please be specific. How would you lead the country during this next stage of the coronavirus crisis? 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
So, as you know, 2.2 million people modeled out were expected to die. We closed up the greatest economy in the world in order to fight this horrible disease.
They closed
that
up
came
China.
from China.
What?
It's a worldwide pandemic. It's all over the
Right.
world. You see the spikes in Europe.
Followed by
and
India.
other places right now. If you notice, the mortality rate is down 85%.
Yeah, it's 'cause everybody
the
already
excess
died.
mortality rate is way
Right, all
down
the
and much
susceptible
lower
people
than
are
almost
dead.
any other country. And we're fighting it, and we're fighting it hard. There is a spike. There was a spike in Florida, and it's now gone. There was a very big spike in Texas.
Oh, it's
It's now
greatest
gone.
counter,
There was a
one.
very big spike in Arizona. It's now gone. And there are some spikes and surges in other places. They will soon be gone. We have a vaccine that's coming. It's ready. It's going to be announced within weeks, and it's going to be delivered. We have
Just like I said weeks
Operation
ago.
Warp Speed, which is the military is going to distribute the vaccine. I can tell you from personal experience that I was in the hospital. I had it, and I got better. And I will tell you that I had something that they gave me, a therapeutic, I guess they would call it. Some people could say it was a cure. But I was in for a short period of time, and I got better very fast, or I wouldn't be here tonight. And now they say I'm immune. Whether it's 4 months or a lifetime, nobody's been able to say that. But I'm immune.
No, they said you're a mule.
More and more people are getting better.
Carrying
We have
diseases from pot to
a
pot.
problem that's a worldwide problem. This is a
You're a
worldwide
flea-ridden
problem. But I've been congratulated by
mule.
the heads of many countries on what we've been able to do. If you take a look at what we've done in terms of goggles and masks and gowns and everything else.
I know
and in
goggles
particular
better than
ventilators,
anyone.
We're now
I
making
searched for all my
ventilators
terms on
all
it.
over the world.
And that's
Thousands
just the
and
Harry Potter
thousands a
cosplay
month
party.
distributing them all over the world. It
the
will go
PPE's
away.
coming
and
along
as I
great,
say,
too.
We're rounding the
If you
turn,
vote for
we're
me,
rounding the
everyone's in
corner. It's
Gryffindor.
going away.
Okay, former Vice President Biden, to you, how would you lead the country out of this crisis? You have
Salting
2
Hat
minutes
resigns.
uninterrupted.
220,000 Americans dead. You hear nothing else I say tonight. Hear this. Anyone who's responsible for not taking control, in fact, not saying I take no responsibility initially. Anyone who's responsible for that many deaths should not remain as President of the United States of America. We're in a situation where there are 1,000 deaths a day now.
USA.
There are
USA.
over 70,000 new cases per day. Compared to what's going on in Europe, as the New England Medical Journal said, they're starting from a very
New England's in the
low
U.S.
rate. We're starting very high rate. The expectation
The
is
real
we'll have
England's in
another
Europe, Joe.
200,000 Americans dead between now and the end of the year. If we just wore these masks,
unless you ask them,
President's
they
own
wouldn't admit
advisors
to
have
it.
told them, we could save 100,000 lives. And we're in a circumstance where the president thus far
And don't wear
still
them like
has
Rudy Giuliani's
no
been wearing
plan,
his.
no comprehensive plan. What I would do is make sure we have everyone encouraged to wear a mask all the time. I would make sure we move in the direction of rapid testing, investing in rapid testing. I would make sure that we set up national standards as to how to open up schools and open up businesses so they can be safe and give them the wherewithal, the financial resources to be able to do that. We're in a situation now where the New England Medical Journal, one of the most serious journals in the
They've
in the
never
whole
made a
world,
joke.
said for the first time ever that the way this president has responded to this crisis has been absolutely tragic. And so, folks, I will take care of this. I will end this. I will make sure we have a plan.
I will at least
President
do
Trump,
something.
I'd like to follow up with you in your comments. You talked about taking a therapeutic. I assume you're referencing Regeneron. You also said a vaccine will be coming within weeks.
Yes.
Is that a guarantee?
No, it's not a guarantee, but it will be by the end of the year. But I think it has a good chance.
No, it's not a guarantee, but it will happen.
And it will be distributed very
Can
quickly.
you tell us which companies?
Johnson & Johnson is doing very well. Moderna is doing very well. Pfizer is doing very
I
well.
can
and we
guarantee
have
that one of
numerous
these
others.
6 companies
Then we
will
also
probably
have
come up
others that we're working on very closely with other countries, in particular Europe.
Let me follow up with you, and because this is new information, you have said a vaccine is coming soon, within weeks now. Your own officials say it could take well into 2021 at the earliest for enough Americans to
Well, that's
get
still a number
vaccinated.
of weeks
And even then, they
away.
say the country will be wearing masks.
I never said the exact number.
into 2022. Is your timeline realistic?
No, I think my timeline is going to be more accurate. I don't know that they're
It's not
counting on the
realistic. It's gonna
military
be
the way
more
I do.
accurate.
but we have our
Wait, did he just say he's
generals
going
lined
to
up, one in
utilize the
particular
military
that's
to
the
vaccinate
head of
people?
logistics, and this is a very easy distribution.
load
for
up
him. He's
guns
ready to
full
go
of
as soon as we have the vaccine.
He's getting that
vaccines.
Overwatch gun.
Just
To have
start mowing
100
down
million
crowds.
vials. As soon as we
Yeah,
have
the
the
Overwatch
vaccine,
gun.
he's ready to go.
Vice President Biden, your
It's just
reaction,
mercy.
just 40% of Americans say they would definitely agree to take a coronavirus vaccine if it was approved by the government. What steps would you take to give Americans confidence in a vaccine if it were approved?
I would
Make
do
sure it's
literally
totally-
anything.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep saying that.
See,
I will do
look at it.
something.
Go through all the processes. And by the way, this is the same fellow who told you this is going to end by Easter last time. This is the same fellow who told you that, don't worry, we're going to end this by the
Who's he
summer.
talking
We're about
about?
to go into a dark winter.
Is he talking about
Dark
Hunter
winter.
Biden?
And he has no clear plan.
Who would
and
say
there's
that?
No prospect
I'll kill him.
that there's going to be a vaccine available for the majority of the American people before the middle of next year.
President Trump, your reaction, he says you
I don't
have no
think we're going to
plan.
have a dark winter.
I don't believe in the
We're
night.
opening up our
It doesn't
country.
exist.
We've learned and studied and understand the disease, which we didn't at the beginning. When I closed and
It's a
banned
virus, all
China
right.
from coming in heavily infected, and then ultimately Europe.
I don't think we're
China
having a
was in
dark winter.
January. Months
Donald,
later, he was saying
the
I was
sun literally
xenophobic.
goes
I did it
away
too
for a
soon. Now
while.
he's saying, oh, I should have.
Right? That's how
Not on my watch.
winter works.
But he didn't move quickly. He was months behind me, many months behind me. And frankly,
This
he
guy
ran
who
the
was not
H1N1
president did not
swine
resolve
flu,
the issue.
And it was a total disaster, far less lethal, but it was a total disaster. Had that had this kind of numbers, 700,000 people would be dead right now. But it was a far less lethal disease. Look, his own person who ran that for him, who, as you know, was his chief of staff, said it was catastrophic. It was horrible. We didn't know what we were doing. Now he comes up and he tells us
It would
how to
work a
do
lot better
this.
if we didn't all
Also,
remember
everything
swine
that he
flu.
said
It would
about the
be
way
like
every
nothing.
single move that he said we should make, that's what we've done. We've done all of it. But he was way behind us.
Vice President Biden, your response.
My response is he is xenophobic, but not because he shut down access from China. And he did it late after 40 countries had already done that. In addition to that, what he did, he made sure that we had 44 people that were in there in China trying to get to Wuhan to determine what exactly the source was. What did the president say in January? He said, no, he said, he's being transparent. The president of China is being transparent. We owe him a debt of gratitude. We have to thank him. And then what happened was we started talking about using the Defense Act to make sure we go out and get whatever is needed out there to protect people. And again, I go back to this. He had nothing. He did virtually nothing. And then he gets out of the hospital and he talks about, don't worry, it's all going to be over soon. Come on. There's not another serious scientist in the world who thinks it's going to be over soon.
President Trump, your reaction?
I say over soon. I say we're learning to live.
No,
with
you
it. We
literally
have
just
no
said
choice.
it was
We
going to be
can't
over
lock
in
ourselves up
weeks.
in a basement
That there was going to be a
like Joe
vaccine.
does.
When
He has the-
you said that like
has
5
the
minutes
ability
ago,
to
man.
line himself up.
172
I don't know.
weeks
He's
is still
obviously made a lot of
weeks,
money
John.
someplace, but he has this thing about living in a basement. People can't do that. By the way, I, as the president, couldn't do that. I'd love to put myself in the basement or in a beautiful room in the
did.
White House and go away for a year
During
and a half
the-
until it's
during the
finished.
protests.
I can't do that. And Kirsten, every meeting I had, and I meet a
President
lot of
Goldfish.
families, including Gold Star families and military families. Every meeting I had, and I had to meet them. I had to. It would be horrible to have
He looks like they
canceled
started
everything.
embalming
I
him
said,
already, doesn't he?
This is dangerous, and you catch it. And I caught it. I learned a lot. Great doctors,
I learned
great
this
hospitals,
sucks.
and now I recovered. 99.9 of young people recover. 99%
So
of people
only 99
recover.
young
We
people
have to recover. We
recovered.
can't close up our nation. We
I
have
have
to
a great
open our
authority that
school,
100%
and
of
we
President
can't close
Trump's
up our
recover.
nation, or you're not going to have a nation.
The
And of
wonderful,
course, the CDC
wonderful
has said
mortality
young
rate.
people Can
the
be
best.
sick with COVID-19
The
and can
most
pass it.
important
Vice President
statistic I
Biden, I
care
want to talk
about.
broadly about strategy, though. You
Can
have
I respond to that?
30 seconds, please,
For
and then
30
I have a
seconds.
question.
No, number one, he says that we're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it. You folks home will have an empty chair at the kitchen table this morning. That man or wife going to bed tonight and reaching over to try to touch out of habit where their wife or husband is gone. Learning to live with it. Come on. We're dying with it because he has never said, you said it's dangerous. When's the last time? Is it really dangerous still? Are we dangerous? You tell the people it's dangerous now? What should they do about the danger? And you say, I take no responsibility.
Let me talk about your two.
Excuse me, I
very
take full responsibility. It's not my fault that it came here. It's China's fault. And you know
I
what?
take full
It's not Joe's
responsibility.
fault
It's
that it
not my
came
fault.
here either. It's China's fault. They kept it from going into the rest of China for the most part.
I take
but
full
they didn't keep it
responsibility
from coming
for
out
China's
to the world,
mistake.
including Europe and ourselves.
Vice President Biden.
The fact is that
Oxygen
when we
here.
knew it was coming, when it hit, what happened? What did the president say? He said, don't worry, it's going to go away. Be gone by Easter. Don't worry, the warm weather. Don't worry, maybe inject bleach. He said he was kidding when he said that, but a lot of people thought it was serious. A whole range of things the president has said. Even today, he thinks we are in control. We're about to lose 200,000 more people.
President Trump.
Look, perhaps just to finish this, I was kidding on that, but just to finish this, when I closed, he said I shouldn't have closed. And that went on for months. Nancy Pelosi said the same thing. She was dancing on the streets in Chinatown in San Francisco. But when I closed, he said, this is a terrible thing, you're xenophobic. I think he called me racist even. And because
You
I
are.
was closing it to China. Now he says I should have closed it earlier. Joe, it doesn't work.
I didn't say either of those things. You didn't say
certainly
should have
did.
called
You
Pelosi.
certainly
Here we go.
I talked about his xenophobia in a different context. It wasn't about closing the border to Chinese coming to the United States.
All right, I want to talk about both of your different strategies to
He
handling.
thought
It was
I
all the
shouldn't have
racism.
closed the border. That's obvious.
Do you want to respond to that quickly, Vice President
No.
Biden? Okay. Let's
No,
talk
fuck him.
strategies toward dealing with this. Mr. Vice President, you suggested you would support new shutdowns if scientists recommended it. What do you say to Americans who are fearful that the cost of shutdowns, the impact on the economy, the higher rates of hunger, depression, domestic and substance abuse outweighs the risk of exposure?
Your grandma
to
wants to stay
What I would
alive.
say is I'm going to shut down the virus, not the country. It's his ineptitude that caused the country
Oh,
to
I
have
didn't
to
realize
shut
that was
down
an
in
option.
large part. Why businesses have gone under, why schools are closed, why so many people have lost their living, and why they're concerned. Those other concerns are real. That's why
kind
he
of
should
annoying
have
that
been,
all the
instead of
focus
in
is
a
on the
sand trap
virus
in
as
his
well,
golf
not the
course.
other
He should have been
3 years.
negotiating
It makes
with
sense.
Nancy
It's just
Pelosi and the
frustrating.
rest of the Democrats and
Yeah,
Republicans about what to do
Because his
about
current
the
line
acts
is
that
like
are
everything
passing
was going
for
great until
billions
the
of dollars
virus, and
to make
everybody's
sure
forgotten
people
how good
had
it
the
was going.
capacity.
But you haven't
Right.
ruled out
It's like,
more
I was doing so
shutdowns.
well. Like,
Well,
really?
No, I'm not
Were ya,
shutting down the neighborhood.
champ?
There are, look, You need standard. The standard is if you have a reproduction
looking
rate
old.
in a community that's above
I'm
a
not talking
certain level,
down,
everybody says, slow up.
He said reproduction.
More social distancing. Do not open bars and do not open gymnasiums. Do not
Don't
open
do it,
until you get this
Danny.
under control. Under
Pence
more
told me
control.
not to interrupt
but when
again.
you do open, give the people the
He's
capacity to be
twitching.
able to
He's
open
listening.
and have the
He's
capacity
literally
to do it
jiggling.
safely. For example, schools, they need a lot of money to open. They need to deal with
Trump
ventilation
bad.
systems. They need to deal
Trump
with smaller
bad.
classes, more teachers, more pods. And
Shouldn't have put that
he
squirrel down my
refused to
pants before I
support
came
that
out of here.
money, or at least up to now.
Let's talk about schools. President Trump,
I
you,
think we have to respond, if I might.
please, and then I have a follow-up.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. Look, all he does is talk about shutdowns, but forget about him. His Democrat governors, Cuomo in New York, you look at what's going on in California, you look at Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Democrats
These are some
all,
states I
they're
know.
shut down so tight, and they're dying. They're dying. And he supports all these people. All he talks about is shutdowns. No, we're not going to shut down, and we have to open our schools. And it's like, as an example, I have a young son. He also tested positive. By the time I spoke to the doctor the second time, he was fine. It just went away. Young people. I guess
Oh,
it's the
my
immune
God.
system.
Let me follow up with you, President Trump. You've demanded schools open in person and insist they can do it safely. But just yesterday, Boston became the latest city to move its public school system entirely online after a coronavirus spike. What is your message to parents who worry that sending their children to school will endanger not only their kids, but also their teachers and families?
I want to open the schools. The
I
transmittal
love
rate
Boston.
to
I'm
the
a regular at
teachers
the bar.
is
Cheers.
very small, but I want to open the schools. We have to open our country.
Norm.
We're not going to have a country. You can't do this. We can't keep this country closed. This is a massive country with a massive economy. People are losing
understand that
their
this country
jobs.
is big.
They're committing suicide. There's depression, alcohol, drugs at a level that nobody's ever seen before. There's abuse,
sorry, I forgot to turn off my heat.
abuse. We have to open our country. You know, I've said it often. The cure cannot be worse than the problem itself. And that's
President.
what's
Oh, it says I'm gonna
happening.
ignore your
And he
questions.
wants
Say
to
whatever
close
I
down.
want.
He'll close down the country if one person in our massive bureaucracy says we should close it down.
Vice President Biden, your
Simply
response.
not
I've
true.
said it once, I've
We ought
said
to
it
be able
1,000
to walk
times.
and chew gum
Joe
at the same
Biden
time.
doesn't want people to
You ought to
die.
be able to safely open.
And that's what's
They
wrong
need
with him.
resources to open. You need to be able to,
How do you vote for someone who doesn't want people to die?
Have social distancing within the business. You need to have.
Why do I
if you have
sound
a
more like
restaurant, you
JFK
need to
every
have
time I do this
plexiglass
impression?
dividers so people cannot infect one another. You need to be in a position where you can take testing rapidly and know whether a person is in fact infected.
starting to vibrate
You need to be
again.
able to trace. You need to be able to provide all the resources that are needed.
Hold it
to
together,
do
Johnny.
this. And that is not
Trump bad.
inconsistent with saying that what we're going to make sure that we can open safely. And by the way,
It's like he
all the
doesn't tell
teachers out
himself
there,
how to,
not
like,
that many
function.
are going to die, so don't worry about it.
Ink,
So don't worry
open
about it.
eyes.
President Trump, let me follow
He's
up.
just bald.
By the way, I will say this.
Open
If
eyes.
you go and look at what's happened to New York,
He's just bald
it's
at
a
any amount of
ghost
time
town.
where he's not talking.
It's a ghost town. And when you talk about plexiglass, these
This
are restaurants
town
that are dying.
is turning
These are
like a
businesses
ghost
with no
town.
money. Putting up plexiglass is unbelievably expensive, and it's not the answer. I mean, you're going to sit
I'm
there
gonna
in a
crack down
cubicle
on
wrapped
these
around with
scandalous plexiglass
plastic.
dealers.
These are businesses that are dying, Joe. You can't do that to people. You
But you
just
can-
can't. Take a look at New York and what's happened to my wonderful
That won't win
city
people
for-
over in the
for
plexiglass
so many
states.
years. I loved it. It was vibrant. It's dying. Everyone's leaving New York.
Take a look
Vice
at what
President
New
Biden.
York has done in terms of turning the curve down in terms of the number of
that's him,
people
it's
dying.
ghost town,
And
New
I don't
York.
look at this in terms of what he does.
There's a
Blue
city
states
on
and
the
red
decline.
states. They're all the United States. And look at the states that are having such
It
a
used to be the
spike
Big Apple.
in
Now it's
the
the Big
coronavirus.
Grapple.
They're the red
I guess.
states.
It tastes like a
The
grape.
states in the
It looks
Midwest.
like an apple.
The states in the upper
Why
Midwest.
can't
That's
New
where
York
the
be more
spike
like
has occurred
Detroit?
significantly. But they're all Americans. They're all Americans. And what we
Hello,
have to do
Louise
is
Carter. How you
say,
doing?
wear these masks, number one. Make sure we get the help that the businesses need that has money's already been passed to do that. It's been out there since the beginning of the summer, and nothing's happened.
President, New York has lost more than 40,000 people, 11,000 people in nursing homes.
President Trump, what
when you
about-
say spike, take a look at what's happening in Pennsylvania, where they've had it closed. Take a look at what's happening with your friend in Michigan, where her husband's the only one allowed to do anything. It's been like a prison. Now it was just ruled unconstitutional. Take a look at North Carolina. They're having spikes, and they've been closed. and they're getting killed financially. We can't let that happen.
But what about the
You
other
can't let
46
that happen.
states? There's
We have
more
to
states.
Open up, and we understand
If I keep
the
pointing
disease.
out that
We
the
have to
virus is
protect
going
our
up, that'll
seniors. We have to
definitely win me the
protect our
election.
elderly. We have to protect especially our seniors with heart problems and diabetes problems. And
It's a bullshit.
we have the best testing
strategy,
in the
Colin. Let's see how it
world
works
by
out for
far.
'em.
That's why we have so many cases.
Let me follow up
It's a
with you
joke.
before we move on to our next section. President Trump, this week you called Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's best-known infectious disease expert, quote, a disaster. You described him and other medical experts as, quote, idiots. If you're not listening to them, who are you listening to as you fight this?
I'm listening to all of them, including Anthony. I get along very well with him.
Anthony's like, what?
He did say, don't wear masks. He did say, as you know,
I get along
this
very
is
well
not
with that
going to be a
idiot
problem.
disaster of Dr. Fauci.
I think he's a Democrat, but that's okay. He said this is not going to be a problem.
It's a term
We
of
are not going to
endearment.
have a problem at all. When Joe says that,
I love venison.
I said, Anthony Fauci said, and others, and many others, and I'm not knocking him a lot. Nobody knew. Look, nobody knew what this thing was. Nobody knew where it was coming from, what it was. We've learned a lot. But Anthony said, don't wear masks. Now he wants to wear masks. Anthony also said, if you look back, exact words, here's his exact words. This is no problem. This is going to go away soon. So he's allowed to make mistakes. He happens to be a good person.
Vice President Biden, your response quickly, and then we're going to move on to the next section.
My response is that think about what the president knew in January and didn't tell the American people. He was told this was a serious virus that spread in the air, and it was much worse than the flu.
So?
He went on record and said to one of your colleagues, recorded, that in fact he knew how dangerous it was, but he didn't want to tell us. He didn't want to tell us because he didn't want us to panic. He didn't want us. Americans don't panic. He panicked. But guess what? The media found out in the New York Times the other day that in fact his folks went to Wall Street and said this is a really dangerous thing, and a memo out of
toilet
that meeting,
paper
not from this
aisles.
administration, but from
Let's
some of the
be
brokers
real,
said,
Joe.
Sell short because we got.
I like you.
It's a dangerous problem.
Well, this is
I'm going to
one
give you
this
30
is one I
seconds to
haven't-
respond, and then we're
The
going
Wall
to
Street
move
one,
on.
I don't know. Somebody went to Wall Street. You're the one that takes all the money from Wall Street. I don't take it.
I haven't.
You have raised a lot of money, tremendous amounts of money. And every time you raise money, deals are made, Joe. I could raise so much more money as president and
And
as
if there's
somebody
one
that knows
thing
most
my
of
fan
those
base
people.
hates,
I
it's
could
people
call
who
the heads
raise
of
money.
Wall Street, the heads of every company in America. I would blow away every record, but I don't want to do that because it puts me in a bad position. And then you bring up Wall Street. You shouldn't be bringing up Wall Street because you're the one that takes the money from Wall Street, not me. I could blow away your records.
I don't even like
you wouldn't
Michael
believe. We
Douglas.
don't need money. We have plenty of money. In fact, we beat Hillary Clinton with a tiny fraction of the money that she was able.
All right, gentlemen, we're
But
going to
don't
move
tell me
on.
about Wall
Average
Street.
We're gonna-
contribution $43.
All right, we're going to move on to our next section, which is national security. And I do want to start with the security of our elections and some breaking news from overnight. Just last night, top intelligence officials confirmed again that both Russia and Iran are working to influence this election. Both countries have obtained U.S. voter registration information, these officials say, and Iran sent intimidating messages to Florida voters. This question goes to you, Mr. Vice President. What would you do to put an end to this threat? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
I made it clear, and I ask everyone else to take the pledge. I made it clear that any country, no matter who it is, that interferes in American elections will pay a price. They will pay a price.
$43.
Overwhelmingly
Pay
clear.
your contribution.
Won't even get into the last one. This election, that Russia has been
Well
involved,
done, sir.
China's been involved to some degree, and now we learn
Excellent.
that Iran is involved. They will pay a price if I'm elected. They're interfering with American sovereignty. That's what's going on right now. They're interfering with American sovereignty.
No,
And to the best
shit,
of
we
my
better not
knowledge, I don't
interfere
think
with
the
the election
president
in
said
his
anything to
benefit
Putin
then.
about it. I don't think he's stalking him a lot.
Russia's
I don't think
like,
he said a
I am
word.
not
I don't
voting
know
for
why
him
he
now.
hadn't said a word to Putin about it. And I don't know what he has recently said, if anything. to
Russia, the
Iranians.
biggest
My
swing
guess
state.
is he'd probably be more outspoken with regard to the Iranians. But the point is this, folks. We are in a situation where we have foreign countries trying to interfere in the outcome of our election. His own national security advisor told him that what is happening with his buddy, I will. His buddy, Rudy Giuliani, he's being used as a Russian pawn. He's being fed information that is Russian, that is not true. And then what happens? Nothing happens. And then you find out that everything that's going on here about Russia is wanting to make sure that I do not get elected the next president of the United States because they know I know them and they know me. I don't understand why this president is unwilling to take on Putin when he's actually paying bounties to kill American soldiers in Afghanistan, when he's engaged in activities that are trying to destabilize all of NATO. I don't know why he doesn't do it, but it's worth asking the question, why isn't that being done? Any country that interferes with us will, in fact, pay a price because they're affecting our sovereignty.
President Trump, same question to you. Let me ask the question. You're going to have 2 minutes to respond. For 2 elections in a row now, there has been substantial interference from foreign adversaries. What would you do in your next term to put an end to this? 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, if I have a second term, I don't have to face another election, so I don't care.
Joe got $3.5
Vladimir
million
Putin told me
from
it's perfectly
Russia.
normal for each voter to have a
came
little
through
voter inside who has a
because he
little
was
voter inside of
friendly
him.
with the
Who has a little voter
mayor
inside
of
of him?
Moscow, and he was the mayor of
You ever seen
Moscow's wife.
Alien? Great
And
movie.
$3.5 million.
I like that.
Your family got $3.5 million, and someday you're going to have to explain why did you get 3.5. I never got any money from Russia. I don't get money from Russia. Now about your thing last night,
I have to
knew
give
all
them
about
money
it.
after the P-tape debacle.
John Ratcliffe, who was fantastic, D&I, he said the one thing that's common to both of them, they both want you to lose because there has been nobody tougher to Russia. Between the sanctions, nobody tougher than me on Russia. Between the sanctions, between all of what I've done with NATO,
gave
I've
Putin a
got the
friendly
NATO
noogie
countries
once.
to put
Very
up
tough.
an extra $130 billion, going to $420 billion a year. That's to guard against Russia. I sold,
Russia,
while he was
New
selling
Jersey.
pillows and sheets, I sold tank busters to Ukraine. There has been nobody tougher on Russia than
Ukraine,
Donald
which is
Trump.
a part of Russia.
And I'll tell you, they were so bad. They took over the
I
the
sold
submarine
arms to a
port.
foreign
You remember
country.
that very well. During your term, during you and Barack Obama, they took over a big part of what should have been Ukraine. You handed it to them. But you were getting a lot of money from Russia. They were paying you a lot of money, and they probably still are. But now, with what came out today,
I
it's
bet.
even worse. All
He
of the
sounds
emails, the horrible
Like
emails
sad,
of the
like
kind
a
of
little
money
boy.
that you were raking in, you and your
They're
family.
paying you. I
And
said,
you were vice president when
And
some
my
of this
mommy
was happening.
said that
And
Russia
it should have never
was paying
happened.
your
And I
daddy
think you
to,
owe an
give him
explanation to the American
Ukraine,
people.
and I didn't get no
Why
money.
is it? Somebody just had a news conference a little while ago who was essentially supposed to work with you and your family, but what he said was damning. And regardless
What?
of me, I think you have to clean it up and
Biden's
talk to
just
the
letting him
American
go.
people. Maybe you can do it right now.
All right.
Vice President Biden, you may respond. 30
straight
seconds.
here.
And then I do want to follow up on the election security.
I have not taken a penny from any foreign source ever in my life. We learned that this president paid 50 times the tax in China, has a secret bank account with China, does business
Hey,
in China,
August, please ask about his
and in
debts and
fact
foreign bank
is
accounts.
talking
There you
about me
go.
taking money. I have not taken a single penny from any country whatsoever, ever. Number one. Number two, this is a president, I have released all of my tax returns, 22 years. Go look at them. 22 years of my tax return. You have not released a single solitary year of your tax return.
That's
What
only
are you
because
hiding?
I never filed
Why
one.
are you unwilling? The foreign countries are paying you.
Would you
a
release
lot.
them if you're
Russia's
committing
paying you a lot.
fraud?
China's paying
I
you
mean,
a lot. And your hotels,
would you-
and all your businesses all around the country.
Should I?
All around the world.
Please tell me.
China's building.
I'm
a new
very
road to a
confused
new-
about everything.
A golf course you have overseas. So what's going on here?
Why do they call it
release
a
your
tax
return
return
or
when you
stop
send it
talking
to
about
them?
corruption?
President Trump, your response.
First of all, I called my accountants under audit. I'm going to release them as soon as we can. I want to do it, and it'll show how successful, how
As
great
I've been
this
saying for the last
company
5
is. But
years.
much more importantly than that, we're saying $750.
I've been
I asked
audited
them
for
a week
fucking
ago,
8
I said,
years.
What did I pay? They said, sir,
Look,
you
there's a lot of dodgy
prepaid
paperwork to
tens
go
of
through. Give
millions
him
of dollars.
time.
I prepaid my tax. Tens over the last number of years. Tens of millions of dollars I prepaid because at some point they think it's an estimate. They think I may have to pay tax. So I already prepaid it. Nobody told me that.
Did your accountant
Nobody
tell you
told
when
you
you
that.
could release
Excuse
them?
me. And it wasn't written whenever they write this. They keep talking about $750, which I think is a filing fee. But let me just tell you, I prepaid millions and millions of dollars in
Millions.
taxes. Number one. Number two, I don't make money from China. You do. I don't make money from Ukraine.
No, I don't.
I don't
You
make
do.
money from Russia. You made $3.5 million, Joe, and your son gave you. They even have a statement that we have to give 10% to the big man. You're the
Oh,
big
'cause
man.
it's
I
time
think.
to change
I don't
somebody's
know, maybe
nappy.
you're not, but you're the big man, I think. Your son said we have to give 10% to the big man. Joe, what's that all about? It's terrible.
All right, gentlemen, I want to ask you both some questions
I have to
about all of
respond
this,
to
but
that.
I'm going to let you both respond very quickly. You just said you spoke to your accountant
Yes.
about potentially releasing your taxes. Did he tell you when you can release them? Do you
As
have
soon
a
as the audit is
deadline for
finished.
when you're going to release them
I
to the
get
American
treated
people?
worse than the Tea Party
What?
got treated.
No one's talked about the
There's a
Tea
lot of people
Party in
there
fucking
deep down
5
in the
years.
IRS, they treat me horribly. We made a deal. It was all settled until I decide to run for president. I get treated
Why
very
doesn't someone
badly
from the
by the
IRS just
IRS,
come out
very
and go, like,
unfairly.
we're not auditing
But
him.
we
It's
had a
not
deal all
happening.
done. As
What are you
soon as we're
talking about?
completed with the deal, I want to release it. But I have paid millions and millions of dollars, and it's worse than paying. I paid in advance. It's called prepaying your taxes. I paid in advance.
I want to ask you both about questions regarding your potential foreign entanglements and questions that have been raised to give you both a chance to
Some point
talk
about
about
this
this more broadly. Respond very quickly, and then I'll get to my question.
Why did he's been saying this for 4 years? Show us. Just show us. Stop playing around. You've been saying for 4 years
Everybody
you're going to
knows
release your taxes. Nobody knows it, Mr. President. What they do know is you're not paying your taxes, or you're paying taxes that are so low. When last time he said what he paid, he said, I only pay that little because I'm smart. I know how to game the system. Come on. Come on, folks.
Very quickly, President Trump, and then I want to get to two questions to both of you on this.
I was put through a phony witch hunt for 3 years.
As opposed to one of those
just
real
Started
witch hunts.
before I even got elected.
Joe just had the
They
same
spied on
look
my
that
campaign.
everyone in America
no
should
president should ever have to go
have just
through
had
what I
went,
went
"Oh, for
through."
fuck's
Let me just
sakes."
say this. Mueller and 18 angry Democrats and FBI agents all over the place.
sequel to 12
spent
Angry Men.
$48 million.
It's not as good.
Oh my God,
They went
mute
through
him.
everything
He's
I
not
had,
going anywhere with
including
this.
my
He's
tax
just
returns.
talking.
And they found
He's just talking.
absolutely no collusion and nothing wrong. What's
going on with the sides of his nose?
I guarantee you, if I spent $1 million on you, Joe, I could find plenty wrong. Because
All
the
right.
kind of
I think you got
things
a
that
golf
you've
ball
done
stuck
and the
under the
kind of
bridge.
monies that your family has taken. I mean, your brother made money in Iraq.
Let me-
Millions of dollars. Your other brother made a fortune, and it's all through you, Joe. And they say you get some of it, and you do live very well. You have houses all over the place. You live very well.
If there's
All right,
anything I
gentlemen, let
don't
me
like,
just
it's
ask
people
some
in big
questions
rich
about all of this
houses.
broadly. Vice President Biden, there have been questions
It'd
about
be-
the work
it'd be
your son
terrible
has
if it was
done in
coated in
China
gold.
and
That'd be
for Ukrainian energy
horrible.
company when you were
Jackie,
Vice President.
gold
In
elevator?
retrospect, was anything
I hear
about
your
those
names in big
relationships
writing on the
inappropriate or
outside.
unethical?
Nothing was unethical. Here's what the deal. With regard to Ukraine, we had this whole question about whether or not, because he was on the board, I later learned of a Burisma, a company, that somehow I had done something wrong. Yet every single solitary person, when he was going through his impeachment, testifying under oath who worked for him, said, I did my job impeccably. I carried out U.S. policy. Not one single solitary thing was out of line. Not a single thing, number one. Number two, the guy who got in trouble in Ukraine was this guy trying to bribe the Ukrainian government to say something negative about me, which they would not do and did not do because it never, ever, ever.
I need another drink.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about? China. I have not had, the only guy made money from China is this guy.
This guy.
He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China.
Never
President
to
Trump,
deal with
let me
China.
let me
By the
ask
way,
my question to you.
No.
and
Could I
then
just
we'll-
one thing?
Very quickly.
His son didn't have a job for a long time, was sadly no longer in the military service. I won't get into that. And he didn't have a job. As soon as he became vice president, Burisma, not the best reputation in the world. I hear they paid him $183,000 a month. Listen to this. $183, and they gave him a $3 million upfront payment.
All right.
And he
Sure,
had no
thousands of people
energy.
may
I'm
have
going to let the
died.
Vice President
That's how
respond
this
very
guy's
quickly,
son
and then I
didn't
need
have
to
a
get to a
job,
question to you.
and then
Very
got a
quickly.
job.
Basis for that, everybody investigated that. No one said anything he did was wrong in Ukraine.
Okay, President Trump, this is for you. Since you took office, you've never divested from your
it's a
business.
good
You've
call,
personally
John. Have a bottle
promoted
of
your
scotch.
properties abroad. A report this week, which was referenced, does indicate that your company has a bank account in China. So how can voters know that you don't have any foreign conflicts of interest?
I have many bank accounts.
They're all in
and
China.
listed, and they're all over the place. I mean, I was a businessman doing business. The bank account you're
Doing
referring
business.
to, which is everybody knows about it, it's listed. The bank account was in 2013. That's when it was. It was opened it was closed in 2015, I believe. And then I decided, because I was thinking about doing a deal in China, like millions of other people, I was thinking about it, and I decided I'm not going to do it. Didn't like it. I decided not to do it. Had an account open, and I closed it.
Okay.
Excuse me. And then, unlike him, where he's vice president and he does business, I then decided to run for president after that. That was before. So I closed it before I even ran for president, let alone became president. Big difference. He is the vice president of the United States, and his son, his brother, and his other brother are getting rich. They're like a vacuum cleaner. They're sucking up money
President
every
Trump,
place
thank
he
you.
goes.
We do need to move on. I do want to ask you, Vice President Biden, about China. Let's talk about China more broadly.
Well,
There
it's very
have,
refined
of course,
porcelain.
President Trump has
holds
said
up
that
well
they should
against
pay
heat
for
and,
not being fully transparent in regards to the coronavirus. If you were president, would you make China pay? And please be specific. What would that
Would
look
you
like?
make China
What I
pay?
make China
What?
do is play by the international rules, not like he has done. He has caused the deficit of China to go up, not down, with China, up, not down. We are making sure that in order to do business in China, you have to give all your intellectual property. You have to have a partner in China. It's 51%. We would not do that at all, number one. Number two, we're in a situation where China would have to play by the rules internationally as well. When I met with Xi, when I was still vice president, he said we're setting up air identification zones in the South China Sea. You can't fly through them. I said we're going to fly through them. We just flew B-52, B-1 bombers through it. We're not going to pay attention. They have to play by the rules. And what's he do? He embraces guys like the thugs like in North Korea and the Chinese president and Putin and others, and he pokes his finger in the eye of all of our friends, all of our allies. We make up we're 25% of the world's economy. We need to be having the rest of our friends with us saying to China, these are the rules.
America's
you play
not the
by them or
center
you're
of the
going to pay the
world.
price for not
Biden
paying
loses
by it.
election.
Economically. We were president and vice president.
That's a risky gamble.
I have to respond to that.
Okay. Very quickly, and
His
then we're
son
going to move
walked
on
out
to
with
North
$1.5
Korea.
billion from China to
Not
manage after
true.
spending 10 minutes in office and being in Air Force Two, number one. Number two, there's a very strong email talking about your family wanting to make $10 million a year for introductions.
President Trump, on China policy, though, what
No, but wait a
specifically are
minute.
you going to do? What specifically are you going to do to make China pay? You've said you're going
First
to
of
make
all,
them pay.
China is paying. They're paying billions and billions of dollars. I just gave $28 billion.
New sanctions?
I just gave $28 billion to our farmers. because
Taxpayers'
China,
money.
It's what?
Taxpayers' money. Didn't come from
You
China.
know who the taxpayer is? It's called China. China paid
true.
$28 billion, and you know what they did to pay it, Joe? They devalued their currency, and they also paid up. And you know
Hey,
who
they
got
vote
the
in the
money? Our
elections. Why
farmers,
shouldn't
our
they
great
pay
farmers,
taxes?
because they were targeted. You never charged them anything. Also, I charged them 25% on dumped steel because they were killing our steel industry. We were not going to have a steel industry.
Okay.
And now we have a steel
Okay,
industry.
Vice President Biden, your response, please.
Our response is, look, this isn't about, there's a reason why he's bringing up all this malarkey. There's a reason for it. He doesn't want to talk about the substantive issues. It's not about his family and my family. It's about your family. And your family's hurting badly. If you're making if you're a middle-class family, you're getting hurt badly right now. You're sitting at the kitchen table this morning deciding, well, we can't get new tires, they're bald because we have to wait another month or so. Or are we going to be able to pay
What are
the mortgage?
tires?
Who's going to tell her she
I'm
can't
not
go back
tired.
to
I'm very
community
awake.
college? They're the decisions you're making in the middle-class families like I grew up in
jiggling
Scranton and
begins.
Claymont. They're in trouble.
Can I
We
say
should be
something?
talking about your families, but that's the last
Trump.
thing he wants to talk about.
I want
That is a
to talk
typical
about
statement.
North Korea.
Excuse me, just
I do
for
want
1
to turn
second,
to
please.
10 seconds, Mr. President.
That's
10
a
seconds.
typical political statement. Let's get off this China thing, and then he looks, the family around the table. Just a typical politician when I see that.
Let's talk
I'm
about
not
North
a typical
Korea now.
politician.
Okay,
That's why I got
President
elected.
Let's talk
let's
about-
get off the subject of China. Let's talk around sitting around the table.
All right.
Come on, Joe, you can do better.
We're going to talk about North Korea now.
That's why I
President
got
Trump,
elected.
you've met with
Everybody goes,
North
"Oh,
Korean
shit, we
leader
gotta start
Kim
working
Jong-un
for-
three
voting for
times.
typical
You've talked
politicians."
about your beautiful letters with him. You've touted the fact that there hasn't been a war or a long-range missile
Look,
test.
we
And yet North
experimented
Korea
with the
recently rolled out
business.
its biggest
Now we're
ever
going back.
intercontinental
Right?
ballistic missile and continues to develop its nuclear arsenal. Do you see that as a betrayal of the relationship you forged? Just 30 seconds
China's
here because we
nuclear
need to get on to
arsenal
the next
is a
one.
So
terrific
when I met
football
with
team.
Barack Obama, we sat in the White House right at the beginning, had a great conversation. It was supposed to be 15 minutes, and it was well over an hour. He said the biggest problem
He
we
kept
have with
repeating what
North-
he was
is
saying
North
over
Korea.
and over and over again and asking me if I
indicated
understood
we
yet.
will be in a war with North Korea. Guess what? It would be a nuclear war, and he does have plenty of nuclear capability.
Thanks to me.
In the meantime, I have a very good relationship with
You're
him.
welcome.
Different kind of a guy, but he probably thinks the same thing about me. We have a different kind of a relationship. We have a very good relationship.
we agree to
and
see
there's
other
no
people.
war. And you know, about 2
People,
months
it's a
ago,
little bit of a different
he broke
relationship,
into
right?
a certain
But it's
area. They said,
open.
oh, there's going to be trouble. I said, no, they're not, because he's not going to do that. And I was right. Look, instead of being in a war where millions of people, Seoul, you know, is 25 miles away, millions and millions, 32 million people in Seoul, millions of people would be dead right now.
President
we
Trump,
don't have
that's
a war,
30
and I have a
seconds.
good
Thank
relationship.
you. Vice President Biden, to you. North Korea conducted 4 nuclear tests under the Obama administration. Why do you think you would be able to rein in this persistent threat?
Because I'd make it clear, which we were making clear to China, they had to be part of the deal. Because here's I made it clear, and as a spokesperson of the administration when I went to China, that they said, why are you moving your missile defense up so close? Why are you moving more forces here? Why are you continuing to do military maneuvers with South Korea? I said, because North Korea is a problem, and we're going to continue to do it so we can control them. We're going to make sure we can control them and make sure they cannot hurt us. And so if you want to do something about it, step up and help. If not, it's going to continue. What has he done? He's legitimized North Korea. He's talked about his good buddy who's a thug, and he talks about how we're better off. And they have much more capable missiles, able to reach U.S. territory much more easily than ever did before.
Let me follow up with you, Vice President Biden. You've said you wouldn't meet with Kim Jong-un without preconditions. Are there any conditions under which you would meet with him?
On the condition that he would agree that he would be drawing down his nuclear capacity.
An air-conditioned
The Korean Peninsula should be nuclear-free zone.
It's very hot in North Korea.
Let's move on to American families.
They tried
Very
to
quickly,
meet with
10
him.
seconds,
They
President.
tried to meet with him. He wouldn't do it. He didn't like Obama. He didn't like him. He wouldn't do it.
Okay, I
know
got
for
to give him a
fact they
chance to
tried.
respond to that
He
before we
wouldn't
move
do
on.
it.
You
And
know
that's
what?
You vote
okay.
for me
You know
because
what?
the
North
dictator
Korea,
rules North
we're not
Korea
in a war.
likes me.
We have a good relationship. You know, people don't understand. Having a good relationship
Trump, we
with
have to
leaders
move
of other
on, 'cause
countries
we have
is
a lot
a
of
good thing.
We have a lot of questions to get
Yes,
to.
not
That's
Your
like
response.
saying we had a good relationship with Hitler before he, in fact, invaded Europe, the rest of Europe. Come on. The reason he would not meet with President Obama is because President Obama said, we're going to talk about denuclearization. We're not going to legitimize you, and we're going to continue to put stronger and stronger sanctions on you. That's why he wouldn't meet with us.
All right,
And
let's
it didn't
move
happen.
on. Let's
Excuse
move on
me.
and talk
He
about
left
American
me a
families.
mess, Kristen.
President Trump, okay, we do
They
need to move
left
on.
me a mess. North Korea was a mess.
We
And
need
in
to
fact,
move
if
on
you
so that
remember
we
the
can get
first
to all
2 or
of our
3
other
months,
I'm
questions
pleased to
tonight.
say,
there was a very
I haven't had much
dangerous
time to
period
work
of
on
the
America
first 3
yet.
months
I've been
before
sorting
we
North Korea
sort of
out
worked
the whole
things
4
out.
years.
There was
It's
a very,
great over
they
there now.
left us a mess.
I've really
Obama
turned
would
things
be, I
around.
think, the first to say it was the single biggest problem he thought.
Oh,
that
I'm
our
president
country-
here.
Let's move on to American families and the economy. One of the issues that's most
No one
important to
told
them
me.
is health care, as you both know. Today,
My
there was a
bad.
vote on a new Supreme Court Justice, Amy Coney Barrett, and health care is at the center of her confirmation fight. Over 20 million Americans get their health insurance through the Affordable Care Act. It's headed to the Supreme Court, and your administration, Mr. President, is advocating for the court to overturn it. If the Supreme Court does overturn that law, those 20 million Americans could lose their health insurance almost overnight. So what would you do if those people have their health insurance taken away? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. First of all, I've already done something that nobody thought was possible.
I rubbed my
The
stomach and tapped my head at the same
legislature, I
time.
terminated the individual
I'm the only one who
mandate.
could ever do
That was
that.
the worst part of Obamacare, as we call it. The individual mandate where you have to pay a fortune
He
for
was
the
in hospital
privilege
having
of
a rib
not
removed.
having to pay for bad health insurance. I terminated. It's gone. Now it's in court because Obamacare is no good. But then I made a decision. Run it as well as you
That's
can.
no
To my
good.
people, great people. Run it
No
as well
good.
as you can. I could have gone the other route and made everybody very unhappy. They ran it. Premiums
No,
are
that's the
down,
route you
everything's
did.
down. Here's the problem. No matter how well you run it, it's no good. What we'd like to do is terminate it. We have the individual mandate done. I don't know that it's going to work. If we
I
don't
don't
win,
know.
we will have to run it, and we'll have Obamacare, but it'll be better run. But it no longer is Obamacare, because without the individual mandate, it's much different. Pre-existing conditions will always stay. What I would like to do is a much better health care, much better,
And
Always
what
protect
does that
people with
mean?
pre-existing. So I'd like to terminate Obamacare, come up with a brand new, beautiful health care. The Democrats will do it because there'll be tremendous pressure on them,
Arnold's at
and we
home
might
watching,
even
like, he's
have the
taking my
House by
bit.
that time.
I
And I
was
think
gonna
we're going to
terminate
win the
the
House.
Affordable
Okay,
Care
we'll
Act.
see, but I think we're going to win the House. But come up with a better health care, always protecting people with
better
pre-existing
healthcare.
conditions. And one thing very important, we have 180 million people out there that have
You know what
great
bothers me?
private
Is it
health
just
care. Far more than
is that
talking
we're
about
actually
with
having a debate
Obamacare.
about health care.
Joe Biden is going
right?
to terminate
There shouldn't
all
be
of
a
those
debatable
policies.
thing.
These
It
are
should be
people
like,
that
hey,
love their health
you get
care.
health care.
People that
Yeah.
have been
There you go.
successful, middle income
There's the plan.
people. been
Everyone gets
successful.
healthcare.
They
One
have
of the really frustrating things living in a country with
180
universal
plans,
health care
180 million
is
people,
Americans
families.
who don't like it always
Under
go,
what he wants to
"Oh,
do, which
well,
will
in all these other
basically
countries
be
they have
socialized
queues,"
medicine, he won't even
and
have
they
a
never stop
choice.
to think about the
They want
reason
to terminate
America currently
180
doesn't have
million
queues
plans.
is because
We have done an
people
incredible
at home
job
without
for
health care are dying
and we're going to do even
instead
better.
of
Oh, my
going-
favorite about
Okay,
that
Vice
is that,
President
is
Biden,
that
yes, this is for you. Your health care
being
plan
an
calls for
American
building
who has
on
to go to our
Obamacare. So my
amazing
question is,
healthcare
what is your
system that
plan if the law is
they won't
ruled
give a about.
unconstitutional
I've had
by
to
the
wait
Supreme
a
Court?
good long
You
while
have 2 minutes
myself
uninterrupted.
in waiting
What
rooms.
I'm
That's
gonna
how-
do
that's
is
how they
pass
work.
Obamacare with
Yeah.
a public option.
We do have
Become
waiting
Biden
lists,
care.
but
The
that's
public
because
option is an
everybody
option that
gets
says
the
that
medical care.
If you, in fact,
Right.
do not have the wherewithal to be, if you qualify for Medicaid and you do not have the wherewithal in your state to get Medicaid, you automatically are enrolled, providing competition for insurance companies. That's what's going to happen. Secondly, we're going to make sure we reduce the premiums and reduce drug prices by making sure that there's competition that doesn't exist now
Just
by
make it
allowing
universal, single
Medicare
payer.
to negotiate
Well, pretty much
drug
everybody
prices
else does. It
with
works great.
the insurance
Yeah.
companies. Thirdly, the idea
mean,
that I want to
that annoys me about Biden that he doesn't just embrace universal health care
with 20 candidates for the
system,
nomination
things
but
where
his
I
plan
support
does bring us
private
closer.
insurance.
You know,
That's
Yeah,
why
it's
I
better than an
do. Not
alternative.
one
I mean,
single
thing
person
is,
with private
Hillary
insurance
Clinton once
would
said
lose
you've got to
their
have
insurance
your
under my plan.
the positions that
nor
you have in
did they
public and the
under
positions that you have in
Obamacare.
private.
They did not lose
And
their
I think
insurance
there's truth to
unless they
that.
chose they
But-
wanted to go to something else. Lastly,
I think
we're going to make
Joe
sure
Biden
we're in a
probably does
situation
support
that
single
we
payer, he just
actually
doesn't think it's
protect
electable, right?
pre-existing. There's no
Right.
way he can protect pre-existing conditions. None. Zero.
I mean, and that's what
You
I've been
can't do
like.
it in the
I've been
ether.
telling some other people
He's
who are
been
even like
talking about
unsure,
this for a long
sure about
time.
Biden because he's
There
not
is
progressive
he's
enough.
never come up
It's
with
like
a plan. I
to
just
me,
wanted to
it's like
get
a stepping
the
stone,
pre-existing
right?
conditions
You
plan.
elect
Same
the
thing with
person that gets you a little bit
infrastructure
closer to the
plan
progressive
that we've been
ideals that
waiting
you
since
want,
17, 18, 19, and 20.
What frustrates
and
me is
then
I still
and
don't
you
think
hope you
people
carry
understand
on
anxious.
the momentum. You know,
What
fact
frustrates me
that
is
there-
everybody
he's already
understands how this
cost the
works with
American
the
people
right.
because of his
They go,
terrible
oh,
handling
well,
of the
even if
COVID
he's not the
virus and
worst, he's
economic
nudging us a
spillover.
little closer to
10
extremism.
million people have lost
Right.
their
Okay,
private
then vote
insurance.
for a nudge the
And
other
he wants
way.
to take away 22 million more people who have it under Obamacare and over 110 million people with pre-existing conditions. And all the people from COVID are going to have pre-existing conditions. What are they going to do?
I have a follow-up for you, Vice President
like his
Biden.
face
It
is
relates to
coming off a
something
skull
that
now.
President Trump said. He's accusing you of wanting socialized medicine. What do you say to
You ever seen
people
this
who have
color
concerns
before?
that
This,
your
like,
health care
pallid
plan, which
green
includes a government
color?
insurance option, takes the country
For who?
one step closer to a
Who?
health care system run entirely by the
Trump.
government?
Like,
What's
he's
your
got
Say
the
it's
orange
ridiculous.
going.
It's
He
like
looks
saying that,
ill.
you know, we're
More so.
the idea that the
well, it
fact
looks
that
like
there's a
they've
public
kind of
option
painted
people can
over
choose.
paleness.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Do you know what it's
Look,
like? It's
the
like,
difference
you know when
between
you have
the
an
president,
action
I
figure
think
that you've
healthcare
chewed
is
the
not
head a little bit too
privilege,
much
it's
and
a right.
the flesh color
Everyone
comes
should
off
have
and
the
it's like
right
a
to
sort of
have
a
affordable
green
healthcare.
underneath.
And I am very proud of my plan.
You know what I
It's
mean?
gotten endorsed by
I've never
all
chewed on the
major
heads of my
labor
action
unions,
figures,
as well
but
as
I think I know what you're talking
a
about.
whole range of other
I
people
just
who,
mean
in
when,
fact,
like,
are
the
concerned in
the
medical
paint stuff to
field.
wear,
This
you
is
know?
something that's
Sure,
going to
sure.
save people's
Looks
lives.
like that.
And this is going to give some people an opportunity to have health care for their children. How many of you home are worried and rolling around in bed tonight wondering what in God's name you're going to do if you get
Just
sick?
rolling around in bed.
Because
I
you've
know.
lost your home insurance, your
Roll,
health insurance.
I'm sure he meant, like, tossing and
roll in the
turning, but-
bed.
Provide health insurance for people at an affordable rate.
That's what I do when I'm stressed. Roll
President
around in
Trump-
bed.
He was
Your
there
response.
for 47 years. He didn't do it. He was now there as vice president for 8 years, and it's not like it was 25 years ago. It was 3 3/4. It was just a
I've
little
only
while
had
ago,
4 years
right?
of not
Less
doing
than 4
anything.
years ago. He didn't do anything. He didn't do it. He
Oh,
wants
doing, like, the
socialized
snares
medicine,
that had
and it's
plastic
not that
that
he
turned
wants
green.
it. His vice president. I mean, she he is more liberal than Bernie Sanders and wants it even more. Bernie Sanders wants it. The Democrats want it. You're going to have socialized medicine. Just like you went with fracking. We're not going to have fracking. We're going to stop fracking. We're going to stop fracking. Then he goes to Pennsylvania after he gets a nomination where he got very lucky to get it. And he goes to Pennsylvania And he says, oh, we're going to have fracking. And you never ask that question. And by the way, so far, I respect very much the way you're handling
Joe
this. I
Biden
have
went to
say.
Pennsylvania.
Somebody should
and
ask
didn't
the
even do
question.
anything about
He
Dracula.
goes for a year. There will be no fracking. There
we
will
do
be
have
no
a number of
petroleum.
we have a number of topics.
No, but that's a big question.
We're going to get to.
I respect how you're handling this.
Same
And I'm
thing
going to
with
try to talk over you
socialized
as much as
Vice
possible.
President, your response, please.
My response is people deserve to have affordable health care, period. Period, period, period.
No,
And
Biden.
the Biden care
People
proposal
deserve to
will, in
have
fact, provide for that
health care.
affordable health care,
Just
lower premiums.
health
What we're
care,
gonna do is
not
gonna cost some money.
affordable.
It's going to cost over
Just
$750 billion
health
over
care.
10 years
What, John?
to
Are
do it.
you saying
And they're
people have
gonna
a right
lower
to not
premiums.
to
You can
die
buy
of
into the better
preventable
plans,
illnesses?
the cheaper plans, lower your premiums, deal
I know,
with
crazy.
unexpected
Call me a
billing,
loony,
and
lock me up. But
It's when
yeah,
they go,
prices drop
it's when they go,
significantly. He
you don't
keeps
have a right
talking
to
about it.
somebody
He hasn't
else's
done
labor.
a
Like that
thing
doctor's
for
just
anybody
going
on healthcare. Not a
unpaid.
thing.
Interesting when he
Very
says,
good. Then we're going to talk
when
about
he
what's
says
happening
in a
with
single
Capitol
payer
Hill.
he's talking
system.
about socialized medicine and when he and healthcare. When he talks about a public option, he's talking about destroying your Medicare, totally destroying, and destroying your Social Security. And this whole country will come down. You know, Bernie Sanders tried it in his state. He tried it in his state. His governor was a very liberal governor. They wanted to make it work.
Okay,
Let's
let Vice President Biden respond.
It doesn't
Vice
work.
President
He's
Biden,
a very
your response.
confused guy. He thinks he's running against somebody else. He's running against Joe Biden. I beat all those other people because I disagreed with them. Joe Biden he's running against. And the idea that we're in a situation that they're going to destroy Medicare, this is the guy that actuary Medicare said.
Just rips out a mask.
If in fact he continues to withhold his plan to withhold the tax on Social Security, Social Security will be bankrupt by 2023.
Bernie Sanders.
No way to make up for it. This is the guy who's
I'm Bernie Sanders.
So
And
I mean, the
here.
idea that
Brundle
Donald Trump
Sanders
is lecturing me on Social Security and Medicare.
We've merged into one.
He tried to get
10
rid of.
seconds,
He
Mr.
tried to
President,
hurt
and then I
Social
have to go to
Security
another
years
question.
ago. Years ago. Go back and look at the records. He tried to hurt Social Security years ago.
All
One
right,
thing,
let's move
but
on.
This
I'm
is
going to
the
move
guy
on.
that
Let
when
me-
they
Mr.
announced
Mr. President,
this
I have to
debate.
move on to the next question.
He said
or else
stock
I would
market
like
will
to provide
boom
them with
if I'm
healthcare.
elected. If he's elected, the stock market will crash.
Okay, let's move on to the
Amazingly,
next
Bernie
question.
Sanders won the debate. We don't know how that
The
happened.
stock market is booming. It's his only measure of what's happening. Where I come from in Scranton and Claymont, the people don't live off of the stock market. Just in the last three years during this crisis, the billionaires in this country made, according to the
I don't even know what the fuck they're talking about
$700
anymore.
billion
The
more
town of
dollars.
Scranton and Claymont just
$700 billion
returned
more
to life
dollars.
like one of the gods in black
Because
and white.
that's his only
Someone
measure.
remembered
What
us.
happens to the ordinary? What happens to them?
Let's talk about what's happening on Capitol Hill. We're going to
Kristen,
move on, gentlemen.
401ks are through the roof.
We're gonna
People's
move on.
stock are through the roof.
All right.
And he doesn't come from Scranton. That's like he lived there for a short period of time before he even knew
we're
it.
gonna move on
This is
to
now a
the
debatable point.
Pennsylvania.
Whoa,
Move on to
I
the
know
next question.
Scranton better than
As of
him,
tonight,
okay?
12 million people are out of work.
Scranton,
And as of tonight,
Scranton.
8 million more
My
Americans
good
have
friend
fallen
Michael
into
Scott,
poverty, and
who
more
lives in
families are going
Scranton,
hungry every
okay?
day. Those
The
hit hardest
issue-
are women
the
and
issue of
people
the
of
debate.
color. They
Does
see Washington
Scranton
fighting over a relief bill. Mr. President, why haven't you been able to get them the help they need? 30 seconds here.
Because Nancy Pelosi doesn't want to approve it. I do.
But you're the president.
I do. Again, unfortunately, that's one of the reasons I think we're going to take over the House because of her.
I am?
Pelosi doesn't want to
Of the
approve anything
United
because
States?
She'd love to have some victories on a date called November 3rd.
My fellow
Nancy Pelosi
Armenians.
does not want to approve it. We are ready, willing, and able to do something. Don't forget, we've already approved 3 plans, and it's gone through, including the Democrats, in all fairness. This one she doesn't want. It's near the election because she thinks it helps her politically. I think it hurts her politically.
All right, Mr. Vice President,
You know, the Republican leader in the United States Senate said he can't pass it. He will not be able to pass it. He does not have Republican votes. Why isn't he talking to his Republican friends?
let me follow up with you, Vice President.
we made a
Biden,
deal, the
because
Republicans
let me
will
ask
pass
Vice
it.
President
Strongest
Biden a
shape is a
question. You are
triangle.
the leader of the Democratic Party. Why have you not pushed the Democrats to get a deal for the American people?
Well, I have, and they have pushed it. Look, they passed this act all the way back in the beginning of the summer. This is like it's not new. It's been out there. This HEROES Act has been sitting there. And look at what's happening. When I was in charge of the
Hello,
Recovery
this is
Act with
David. It says,
$800
I'm not gonna
billion,
pretend I know the first thing about
I was
politics,
able
but
to
can someone
get
explain how the final
$145
vote
billion
between
to
people
local
most people
communities
dislike,
that have to
you vote
balance
all
their
the way
budgets,
through,
the states that have to balance
Actually,
their budgets, so then have to
counterintuitive though it is,
they have to
it's a more
fire
likely
firefighters,
outcome because
teachers,
the
first
more popular
responders,
people tend
law
to be popular
enforcement
with
officers,
groups.
so
So
they
what you
can
end up
keep
with
their
is someone
cities
who
and
has
counties running.
broad
He will
disappeal
not
rather
support
than
that. They have
specific
not done a thing for them.
non-appeal.
And
Does
Mr.
that make
McConnell
sense?
said, let them go bankrupt.
So
Let them go bankrupt. Come on.
the primary
What's the matter
system
with
in the
Bill that
United
was passed in the
States is a
House
very
was a bailout
strange
of badly
thing.
run, high
So
crime,
how we finally
Democrat,
finalize our
all run by
candidates
Democrats,
is either
cities and states.
either
It was
a
a way
sitting
of getting a lot
president
of money,
usually will always
billions
get
and billions of
the
dollars to
nomination of the
this
party they're
It was
part
also
of.
a way
Okay?
of getting
It's
a lot
not
of
a
money
guarantee,
from
but that's usually
our
how it
people's
goes.
pockets
The
to
opposing
people that come into our
party
country illegally.
has to hold
We want to take care of
primaries
everything
and
for them.
caucuses,
And what that does,
which
and I'd love to do that, I'd love
basically
to help them, but what that does, everybody
they're designed
all over the
to
world will
send
start pouring into our
delegates,
country. We can't do it.
assign
This was
delegates
a way of
from the
taking
places
care
that
of
have the
them.
primary
This was a way of
elections
spending on things
to a
that had nothing
convention
to do
who
with
then,
COVID, as per your question. But it was
basically on the
really a
honor
big
system,
bailout
say,
for badly
okay,
run Democrat
our
cities and
state
states.
during the
All right, I
primary
wanna-
election
If I
said
get
they want
elected,
this
I'm
person,
not
so
gonna
us
run
as the
a
delegate
proud
from this
Democrat. I'm
state
gonna be an American president.
nominate this
I don't
person.
see red
okay?
states and blue states. What I see is
but
America.
what it usually
United
happens
States.
is
and folks,
you start
every
out with a
single
lot,
state out
and then they
there
start
finds
whittling down,
themselves
whittling
in
down,
trouble.
until
They're gonna
eventually
start
it gets down
laying
to a
off whether they're
handful,
red or blue.
and then
cops, firefighters, first responders.
they kind of
because teachers,
a lot of times they kind of
because
agree
they
amongst
have to
themselves,
balance
going,
their
okay,
budget, and the founders
we're
were smart.
just
They
gonna
allowed the federal
step
government
away.
deficit
We're gonna
spending
drop out.
compensate
We're
for
gonna
the
throw our
United
support
States
behind
of
this
America.
person,
I
so
wanna
we look
talk
like a
about
more
the minimum
unified
wage,
front.
gentlemen. Mr. Vice
And that's
President,
basically what
we are
happened.
talking a lot
Is
about
we got to
struggling
something
small
called
businesses
Super
and
Friday, which
business
has
owners
like
these days.
8 or
Do
9
you
different
think this is the right time to ask them
primaries
to
at
raise
once,
the minimum wage
and a majority of the Democratic
I do,
candidates
because I think one of the things
vying
we're
for the
gonna have to do is we're
nomination
gonna have to bail
realized
them
that they
out
were a
too.
little too far
We should be
behind
bailing them out
to make
now. Those small
it.
businesses.
So they all
You got
dropped
1 in
out
6
at
of them
once
going under.
and threw their
They're
support
not gonna
behind
be able to
Biden,
make it
thinking that
back. They
viewing him
passed
as the most
a
electable.
package
Right.
that allows us to be able to
it's
call
a-
PPP.
it's a
Money is
complicated
supposed to go
system,
to
but the
help them
simple
do
fact
everything
is,
from organize
if
how
a
they
lot
can
of people
deal
like
with their
you,
businesses being open
a lot of
safely.
people are also going to
Schools,
dislike
how
you
they
for the
can make
reasons that you're
classrooms
like.
smaller, how
So
they
the-
can hire more
the
teachers,
person
how
who's
they can
final
put
and judged to be
ventilation
most
systems in.
electable is
They
always going to be
need
the person that
help.
most people
Businesses
dislike
as
a
well as
little
the
bit.
schools need the help.
Yeah.
But
It's
these guys will not help.
Right, because like,
It's not
process.
giving them any of the
going
money.
into this,
We
it
are
was
gonna
between
move on to
between
immigration,
Bernie
but I
Sanders
wanna
and Joe
get your
Biden. They were the
reaction.
two
Small
front
businesses
runners for
by
the Democratic
raising
thing.
the minimum
The
wage.
thing
That's not
is that
helping. I think it should be a state option.
Bernie Sanders is
Alabama
well liked by a
different
lot
than
of
New
people,
York.
but the
New
people who
York is
don't like
different
Bernie
from
Sanders,
Vermont.
they
Every state
vehemently
is different.
don't
It
like
should be
Bernie
a state
Sanders.
option.
You said
Most
very
people
recently-
Help. It's very
tolerate Joe
important.
Biden.
We have to help our
Right.
small businesses.
You
How
said-
are you helping your small
It's the same
businesses
reason
when
people
you're
go to see
forcing
Adam Sandler
wages?
films.
What's going to happen,
Right.
and what's been proven to happen, is when you do that, these small businesses fire many of
no
their
idea what
employees.
You said
Not
very
true,
recently you would
by the way.
consider
Yeah,
raising the
it
federal
is.
minimum
Say it.
wage to $15
Say
an
it.
hour. You said recently you would consider raising
I'm
the
making
federal
another
minimum
drink.
wage to $15 an hour. Is that still the case?
And I would consider it to an extent.
I would
But
consider
what I
it
really
because
like,
administration?
in a second administration, but not to a level that's going to put all these businesses out of business. It should be a state option. Look, I've lived in different places. I know different places. They're all different. Some places, $15 is not so bad. In other places, other states, $15 would be
Okay, President
ruinous.
Trump, thank you. Quick
No
response,
one
Vice
should
President
work
Biden.
2 jobs, 1 job, be below poverty. People are making $6, $7, $8 an hour. These first responders, we all clap for as they come down the street because they've allowed us to make it. What's happening? They deserve a minimum wage of $15. Anything below that puts you below the poverty level. And there is no evidence that when you raise the minimum wage, businesses go out of business. That is simply not true.
We're going to talk about immigration. We're going to talk about immigration now,
Oh,
gentlemen.
goody.
And we're going to talk about
This should be
families
good.
in this context.
Let's see
Mr.
the
President, your
racists.
administration
Let's see
separated
the
children from
racists.
their parents at the border, at least 4,000
They
kids.
said the
You've
magic
since
word, now
reversed your
racists
zero
come to
tolerance
play.
policy, but the United States can't locate the parents of more than 500 children. So how will these families ever be reunited?
It wasn't me.
Children are brought here by coyotes and lots of bad people. people, cartels, and they're brought here, and they used to use them
I
to
don't
get
even know
into
how
our
the coyotes
country.
get them in their
We now
mouths.
have as strong a border as we've ever had. were over 400
I don't know
miles
when the
of brand
coyotes
new
start
wall.
focusing on children,
You
not
see the
road
numbers,
runners,
and we
but
let
it
people in,
happened.
but they have to come in legally, and they come in through
But
marriage.
I don't like
reunite
coyotes when
these
they try to
kids
be
with their
roadrunners, but when they
families,
dance on
Mr.
bar
They built
tables making
cages.
cocktails,
they
they're
used to
okay.
say, I built the cages.
Even if they're
And then
ugly.
They had a picture in a certain newspaper. There was a picture of these horrible cages, and they said, look at these cages. President Trump built them. And then it was determined they were built in 2014. That was him.
Do you have a
built
plan to
cages.
reunite the kids
Yes,
with
we're
their
working on
families?
it we're trying very hard. But a lot of these kids come out without the parents. They come over through cartels and through coyotes and through gangs.
Vice President Biden, let me bring you into this
525
conversation. Quick response and then another question to you.
These 500-plus kids came with parents. They separated them at the border to make it a disincentive to come to begin with. They real tough. We're really strong. And guess what? They cannot, it's not coyotes didn't bring them over. Their parents were with them. They got separated from their parents. And it makes us a laughing stock and violates every notion of who we are as a nation.
Let me ask you a follow-up
Kristen,
question.
they did it. We changed the policy.
Your response
they
to that?
They did it. We changed.
did not
They built the
separate
cages.
they-
Who built the cages, Joe?
Let's talk about what
Who
we're
built the
talking about.
cages,
Let's
Joe?
talk about what we're talking about. What happened? Parents were
Hey, I don't
ripped,
remember
their
the name
kids
of
were
the
ripped
company.
from their arms and separated.
I think I have
And
the
now they
card somewhere.
cannot find over 500 of sets of those parents.
terrible
and those
story.
kids are alone. Nowhere to go. Nowhere to go. It's criminal. It's criminal.
Let me ask
Kristen,
you
I
about
will say this.
immigration.
They went
10
down.
seconds,
We
and then
brought
I need to ask
reporters,
you.
everything. They are
They
so
got somewhere to go.
well
We pushed them back
taken
across the
care of.
border.
They're in facilities that were so clean.
But some
that
of
have
them
gotten
haven't been
such good-
reunited
But
with their
just ask
families.
one question.
Terrible.
Who built the cages? I'd love you to ask them that. Who built the cages?
Let me ask about your immigration policy, Mr. Vice President. The Obama administration did fail to deliver immigration reform, which had been a key promise during the administration. It also presided over record deportations as well as family detentions at the border before changing course. So why should voters trust you with an immigration overhaul now?
Because we made a mistake. It took too long to get it right. It took too long to get it right. I'll be president of the United States, not vice president of the United States. And the fact is, I've made it very clear.
Yeah, blame Obama. That'll be a
Within
vote
100
winner.
days, I'm going to send to the United States Congress a pathway to citizenship for over
'Cause if there's one
11 million
person
undocumented
Americans
people.
don't like, it's
and
Obama,
all
right?
of those so-called dreamers, those DACA kids, they're going to be immediately certified again to be able to stay in this country and put on a path to citizenship. The idea that they are being sent home by this guy, and they want to do that, is they've gone to a country they've never seen before. I can imagine you're 5 years old, your parents are taking you across the Rio Grande River, and it's illegal. And you say, oh, no, Mom, leave me here. I'm not going to go with you. They've been here. Many of them are model citizens. Over 20,000 of them are first responders out there taking care of people during this crisis. We owe them. We owe them.
President
Kristen,
Trump,
he
your
had
reaction.
8 years to do what he said he was going to do. And I've
We
changed
did.
without having a specific. We got rid of catch and release. We got rid of a lot of horrible things that they put in and that they lived with. But he had 8 years he was vice president. He did nothing except build cages to keep children in.
Vice President
Wrong.
Biden, your response.
The catch and release, you know what he's talking about there? If in fact you had a family came across and they were arrested, they in fact were given a date to show up for their hearing. They were released. And guess what? They showed up for a hearing. And this is the first president in the history of the United States of America that anybody seeking asylum has to do it in another country. That's never happened before in America. That's never happened before in America. You come to the United States and you make your case that I seek asylum based on the following premise, why I deserve it under American law. They're sitting in squalor on the other side of the river.
President Trump, your response,
So
30
important.
seconds, and then we'll move
It
on.
just shows that he has no understanding of immigration or the laws. Catch and release is a disaster. A murderer would come in, a rapist would come in, a very bad person would come in.
And an
We would
Irishman.
take their
They all go
name.
to a bar.
We have to
Very
release
bad
them
person.
into our country. And then you say they come back. Less than 1% of the people come back. We have to send ICE out and Border Patrol out to find them.
ICE,
We would
that's a
say,
vote
come
winner.
back in 2 years, 3 years. We're going to give you a court case. You need Perry Mason.
Wait.
We're going to give you a court
Did he
case.
just say
When
Perry
you say they come
Mason?
back, they don't come back, Joe. They never come back. only the really...
He's been watching
I
that
hate
new
to say this,
reboot, that's
but
why.
those with the lowest IQ, they might come back.
Okay,
but they're
President
very,
Trump, let's
very
give
few.
Vice President Biden
Wait,
a
he
chance
just,
to respond, and
he
then
just
we'll
said
move on
people
to
who
the
show
next
up for their
section.
court
Vice
cases
President
Have the
Biden,
lowest
have low
IQ.
IQ.
Oh, he's telling you it's simply not true.
Well, check it out. They don't come back.
Check it out.
Fuck this guy.
let's move
But we
on.
don't have to
Fuck
worry
this
about
guy.
it. They terminated it, so we don't have to worry about it
Let's
anymore.
move on to the next
And you have
section.
525 kids
Trump,
not
the
knowing
more you
where
hear
in God's
about him,
name
you
they're
know?
gonna be in law.
All right. Let's talk about our next section, which is race in America. And I want to talk about the
I
way
once
black
attended a
and
race in
brown
America
Americans
with a marathon.
experience race in this country. Part of that experience is something called
The Daytona
a talk.
500 in Florida,
It happens
great state.
regardless of class and income. Parents who feel they have no choice but to prepare their children for the chance that they could be targeted,
love all the
including by the
races,
police, for no
except the brown
reason other
ones.
than the color of their skin.
And the black ones.
Mr. Vice President, in the next 2 minutes, I want you to speak directly to these families. Do you understand why these parents fear for their children?
I do. You know, my daughter
All right,
is
end
a
of
social
speech.
worker, and she's written a lot about this. Has a graduate degree from the University of Pennsylvania in social work. And you know, one of the reasons why I ended up working on the east side of Wilmington, Delaware, which is 90% African American, was to learn more about what was going on. I never had to tell my daughter, if she's pulled over, make sure she puts, for a traffic stop, put both hands on top of the wheel and don't reach for the glove box because someone may shoot you. But a black parent, no matter how wealthy or how poor they are, has to teach their child, when you're walking down the street, don't have a hoodie on when you go across the street. Making sure that you, in fact,
This shit hurts.
if you get
Like,
pulled
this
over,
shit really sucks.
Yes, sir. No,
Like, I
sir.
hate-
Hands on top.
'Cause,
of the
like,
wheel,
what he's saying is true.
because you are,
Like,
in
this
fact,
shit
the
fucking
victim, whether
sucks.
you're a person making
Like, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing.
$300,000 a year person, or someone who's on food stamps.
I mean,
the fact of the matter
it's embarrassing
is institutional
for me
racism.
as a white male
And we
to hear
have
this,
always
right?
said,
To hear
never
that
lived
this
up
shit
to it.
goes
We
on.
hold these truths
For
to be
people of color,
self-evident.
this is
All men and
probably
women are
like
created equal. Guess
horrific
what?
and
worst-
tragic.
have
and
never ever
The
lived
worst thing
up to
about
it.
it
We've
is
all constantly been moving
everything
the needle
he's saying is
further
absolutely
and further
correct, and it
to
won't make a
inclusion,
difference because anybody
not
who
exclusion.
agrees with him,
This is the first president to
anybody
come
who
along and
knows
says that's
and
the end of that.
cares
We're not going to
already
do that
knows.
anymore. We
And
have to
anybody who
provide
doesn't
for
care
economic
doesn't
opportunity, better
want to
education,
know.
better health care, better access to schools,
Or they just refuse to
better
believe.
access to
Right.
They
opportunity
refuse to accept that this
borrow
is the
money to
reality.
start businesses.
They-
all
they
the
are-
things we can do.
You know,
I've laid
and
out a
the
clear
truth
plan
is, I don't
as to
think there's
how to
anyone
do
left
those
in this
things.
country
Just to
who
give
are
people a
legitimately
shot.
ignorant
It's about
No, it's a
to the
accumulating
willful-
the ability
it's
to
a
have
willful
wealth as well as
refusal
it
Yeah,
is
it's
to be
for that
free
to be
from
reality.
violence.
right. It's
President
straight
Trump,
going.
Same question
No,
to you, and let me
that
remind
doesn't
you
happen.
of the question.
Like-
I would like you to speak directly to these families.
this
Do
is
you
don't drink at
understand
NASCAR, that
why
counts.
these parents fear for their children?
Yes, I do. And again, he's been in government 47 years. He never did a thing except in 1994 when he did such harm to the black community. And they were called, and he called them super predators. And he said that. He said it, super predators. And they have never lived that down. 1994, your crime bill, the super predators. Nobody has done more for the black community than Donald Trump. And if you look, with the
Cool, tell me
exception
when he gets here.
of Abraham Lincoln, possible exception, but the exception of Abraham Lincoln, nobody has done
With
what
the
I've
possible
done.
exception of
Justice
Abraham
reform.
Lincoln,
Obama
nobody has
and
done more for
Joe
black people.
didn't do
Look,
it. I don't even
he
think
freed
they
the
tried
slaves,
because they
but
had no
he
chance at
possibly
doing it.
he did more
They
than
might
me.
have wanted to do it,
Possibly.
but if you had to see the arms I had to twist to get that done, it was not a pretty picture. And everybody
Yes,
knows it,
Ork,
including
same.
some very liberal
Same.
people that cried in my office. They cried in the Oval Office. 2 weeks later, they're out saying, gee, we have to defeat him. Criminal
when you
justice
think
reform,
can't
prison
get
reform,
worse,
opportunity
he always
zones with
finds a
Tim
way.
Scott, a great senator from South Carolina.
Fuck
He came
you.
in with this incredible idea for opportunity zones. It's one of the most successful programs. People don't talk about it. Tremendous investment is being made. Biggest beneficiary, the black and Hispanic communities, and then historically black colleges and universities. After 3 years of coming to the office, I love some of those guys. They were great. They came into the office and they said, I said, what are you doing? After 3 years, I said, why do you keep coming back? Because we have no funding. I said, you don't have to come back every year. We have to come back because President Obama would never give them long-term funding, and I did.
It took me
10-year
3 years to
long-term
realize all these
funding,
people
and I
kept
gave
asking
them
for money
more
over and
money
over again
than they
because it
asked for,
didn't
because
count
they
more
said,
than a
I
year.
think you need more. And I said, the only bad part about this is I may never see you again, because I got very friendly with them, and they like me and I like them. But I saved
Who's he talking about?
colleges
I
and
don't
universities.
know.
Okay, and we're going to talk about both of your records, but your response to that, Vice President?
My response to that is I never, ever said what he accused me of saying. The fact of the matter is, in 2000, though, after the crime bill had been in the law for a while, this is a guy who said, the problem with the crime bill, there's not enough people in jail. There's not enough people in jail. And go on my website, get the quote, the date when he said it. Not enough people. He
'Cause I don't
talked
remember
about
it right now.
marauding gangs, young gangs, and the people who are going to maraud our cities. This is a guy who, in the Central Park five innocent black kids, he continued to push for making sure that they got the death penalty. None of them were guilty of the crimes they were suggested. Look, and talk about granted, he did in fact let 20 people, he commuted 20 people's sentences. We commuted over 1,000 people's sentences. Over 1,000. The very law he's talking about is a law that, in fact, initiated by Barack Obama. And secondly, we're in a situation here where the federal prison system was reduced by 38,000 people under our administration. And one of these things we
Obama's over there like,
should
our?
be no mandatory
Our administration.
in the law. That's why I'm offering $20 billion to states to change their state laws to eliminate minimum mandatories and set up drug courts. No one should be going to jail.
Dude, the prison
because
system
they
in the
have a
US
drug
is out of
problem.
control.
They should be going
Oh,
to
it's
rehabilitation,
ridiculous.
not to
It's a
jail.
nightmare.
We should fundamentally change the system, and that's what I'm going to do.
But why didn't he
Biden.
do it 4 years ago? Why didn't you do that?
Here,
4
I
years
When he
will,
ago?
I will,
wasn't
Less
president.
than that. Why didn't you
I
do it?
am
You were
not-
vice
I will
president. You keep
speak
talking about all
from
these things you're going to do, and you're going to do this.
somewhat
You
of
were
a
there just a short time ago,
personal
and
stake here.
You guys did nothing.
My
You know,
father
Joe,
was
I
a
ran
prison
because
guard.
of you. I ran because of
He
Barack
worked for
Obama,
the
because
state of
you did a poor
Wisconsin
job. If I thought you did a
as,
good
you know,
job, I
state
would have
prison,
never run.
not federal
I would have
prison,
never
state
run.
prison.
I ran because of you. I'm looking at you now. You're a politician.
Those
I ran
prisons
because of you.
were so
Vice President Biden, your response to that, and then I do have some
overpacked
questions for both of you.
I'll
and
tell you what, I hope he does look at me, because what's
just
happening here is
understaffed.
you know who
They
I
were
am.
overpacked
You know
and
who he
understaffed.
is. You know his
That
character, you know my
It
character.
drove
You know our
my
reputation
dad
for honor and telling the truth.
straight to anger.
I am anxious to have this race.
Well, what else can you
I'm
do,
anxious
My
you know?
to
dad
see this
got to-
take place.
Right. My dad got to a point where
character of the country
he
is on the
had a
ballot.
hard
Our
time
character is on the ballot. Look
seeing
at us
me and my
closely.
mom
Let me ask some follow-up.
Excuse me.
as
Respond
me
to
and my
this. We're gonna
mom.
have follow-up.
He saw us
True
as
about Russia,
more inmates.
Ukraine, China, other countries, Iraq. If
And
this
that's
is
the
true,
reality.
then he's
That's
a
the
corrupt
reality of these
politician.
prisons.
So don't
Like,
Yeah, it
give
doesn't
you the
just
stuff
it doesn't
about
just
how you're this
dehumanize the
innocent
prisoners.
baby.
It
They're
dehumanizes
calling
the people
you
who
a
have to work
corrupt
there too.
politician.
Nobody-
Take
President
the
Trump, I
laptop
want to
from
stay
hell.
on the issue of
Excuse me,
race. We're
take a look
talking
at
about the issue.
laptop from hell.
President Trump, we're
Nobody-
talking about
Oh,
race right
talking
now,
about
and I
his
do want to stay
son's
on the
pretend
issue of
laptop.
race. President
Right.
Trump,
I
you've
have
just
to respond to that.
Please,
Because look,
very
there
quickly.
are
Did you see that
50
Rudy Giuliani
former
took that
national
screenshot of a
intelligence
text he
folks
claimed was
who
from the
said
laptop?
that what this he's
It was a
accusing me
screenshot
of
for a
is
phone on a Russian phone
plan.
network.
They have said that this has all the 5 former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
And
You
that's
gotta be-
exactly what-
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what
This
was
is
told.
where he's going. The laptop is Russia,
Yes.
Gentlemen,
Russia.
I want to stay on the issue of race.
You
okay?
have to be kidding. Here we
Mr.
go again
President,
with Russia.
We're going to continue
Well,
on the
did you hear
issue
about
of
the
race.
Borat
Mr.
stuff
President,
with
you've
Giuliani?
described
Certainly
the
did.
Black
can't wait
Lives
to see-
Matter movement.
I can't-
as a
I don't
movement.
like-
You've shared a
I don't
video
like
of
Sacha Baron
advancing white
Cohen.
power
I
to
really
millions
don't.
of your
I mean,
I'm still
supporters.
watching
not
it.
You've
personally.
said that black
I got nothing
professional
against him
athletes
personally. I just
exercising their
his
First
comedy
Amendment
doesn't
rights
like.
should be fired. What do you
This
say
is
to
not my
Americans who
style.
say
I
that
didn't
kind
mind
of
the
language
first
from the
Borat,
president
but it was
is
the beginning
contributing to a
of
climate of hate
just
and
that
racial
again,
strife?
like 5 more
It's the
times.
first time I ever heard
Right.
of Black Lives Matter.
But I
They were
do want to
chanting,
see
pigs in a
this
blanket,
Rudy Giuliani
talking about
shit.
police. Pigs, talking about our police. Pigs in a blanket, fry them
Keep saying
like
it.
bacon. I said, that's a horrible thing. And they were marching down the street.
Yeah, you
And
should
that
do
was
bacon
my
in the oven,
first,
less fat. It's delicious.
glimpse of Black Lives Matter. I thought it was a terrible
Really?
thing. As far as
No,
my
Yeah,
relationship,
I'm saying, like, I was getting the impression that bacon in the oven is actually more fat because now a lot of it runs out of the actual meat.
Racist person in this room.
Yeah, but
What do
if
you
you're
say to
frying it,
Americans
you
who
always
are
have oil in the
concerned
pan
by
as well, so it
that
just
rhetoric
sits
and
in the
I
oil.
don't know
and-
what to say. I got criminal
I
justice
guess.
reform done and prison reform and
But, like,
opportunity
wait, you
zones. I
add
took care of
oil to the
black
pan before you
colleges
fry
and
bacon?
universities. I don't know what
Yeah.
to say. They can say
Why?
anything. I mean,
It has
they
enough
can say
oil in it to
anything.
fry
It's
itself.
a
It fries in
makes
its
me
own
sad
fat.
because I am.
You don't
I
need
am
to add
the least
oil.
Only a little
racist
bit.
person. I can't even see the audience.
I mean,
It's
I-
so
burns to the
dark.
pan.
But I don't care who's in the audience.
Not
I'm
if
the
you pay
least
attention and do on
racist
like lower
person in this
heat.
room.
Yeah, I don't do
Okay, Vice President Biden, let me ask you very quickly, and then I have a follow-up question for you.
No, what you need is actually a grill pan. Get yourself a grill pan with some ridges in it. Then you don't have to worry about it at all.
I have a George Foreman. I don't put oil on the George Foreman.
Racist fire. Every single one.
Yo, wait,
Started off
you
as
use a
campaign
George
coming down the escalator
Foreman
saying
to
he's getting
fry
rid of those
bacon?
Mexican rapists.
So sometimes.
He's banned Muslims because they're Muslims.
You know, I've never thought
He has
about that.
moved
I don't have a
around
George Foreman anymore. I used to. I used to have a George
across
Foreman,
the
but
board.
I don't have one.
It works
says
really well
about the
because
poor
what it
boys.
does is
Last time we were
it
on
gets all that
stage
heat from the
here, he said,
top,
I
but
told
it doesn't
him to
actually
stand
touch the
down
top.
and stand ready.
So it's cooking on the bottom. You don't need to
Right,
like,
right.
flip
Dog
it.
whistle about as
It
big as
cooks
a
nice and
foghorn.
through, but it doesn't like
President Trump, I'm going to give you
burn.
10 seconds
You know what
to
I mean?
respond, and then I have a follow-up.
No, I get you. I
made a
get
reference
you.
to Abraham
Have you ever
Lincoln. Where
tried
did that
like
come in?
prosciutto
You
with
said
it?
you're Abraham
No,
Lincoln.
where
I bet
did
that's
that?
good.
No.
I
I
bet
said
it
not
is.
since Abraham
Like,
Lincoln has
'cause I'm
anybody
using
done what I've done for the black
prosciutto
community.
tomorrow to
And
make
I
some
I didn't say
carbonara.
I'm Abraham
and-
Lincoln. I said not since Abraham
I like doing
Lincoln has
actually like doing
anybody
veg
done
and,
what I've
on
done
a,
for the
on a
black
George Foreman, like a vegetable
community.
kebab,
Now,
you know?
you have done
Like,
nothing other than
yeah.
the crime bill, which
Well,
put
my favorite back when I
tens
had
of thousands of
was
black
breakfast sausage.
men, mostly
Like-
in jail.
Yeah, breakfast
let me
sausage
ask-
would
let me
go
ask
really
you
well.
this.
There's
Well, I
two,
think
I
there's
look at
two
what's
ways you can
happening
do
with
it
the
too.
voting right
you
now.
can
Let me
lay
ask
it
Vice
across the
President
bridge, so you
Biden
get it like a
them
grill
about-
effect.
Very
Or
bad.
you
Right,
can
right.
turn
Just take a look at what's
vertically, do it
happening out
within a
there.
Vice
ridge, and
President
you get a
Biden,
good
let me give you a
through
chance
cook.
to respond within this context.
Yeah,
Crime
like,
bills
well,
that you
to
supported
me,
in the
like-
80s and 90s contributed to the incarceration
I don't
of
necessarily
tens of
need
thousands
my
of young
meat
black
cooked all
men
the way
who had
through.
small amounts
Like,
of
'cause
drugs in their
I, like,
possession. They are
I
sons,
think
they are brothers,
that
they're
a
fathers,
lot of it's
they're
overhyped
uncles,
about like,
whose
oh,
families are still
if it's
to
not
this
cooked,
day,
you can
some of them
contract
suffering the
illnesses.
consequences.
I get
So
it. Like
speak to their
you have to
families.
say
Why
that.
should they vote for
I
you?
think
Like, you have
sausage
to-
is like
Thing
one of
is
the
that in the
exceptions
80s, we
that I
passed
do like to be nice and thorough
100%.
with.
All
Just because it's so
100 senators
mixed
voted
up, it's
for
got like a lot
a
of surface
bill
area that's
on
be exposed to the
But-
air, you know?
how to
What
deal
I'm
with
saying is that,
drugs.
like-
It was a mistake. I've been
I-
trying to change the sense, and particularly the portion on
The-
cocaine. That's why I've been
having
arguing
grill
that,
marks
in fact, we should
is
not
less important
send
to me.
anyone to
Oh, no,
jail
I agree
for
completely.
Yeah.
a pure drug offense. They should be going into treatment
That's what I was thinking.
across the
No,
board.
Biden, talk about
That's what we
sausage.
should be spending money
I'm
on.
saying, I'm
Set up
glad you're
drug
with
courts,
me
which are
on-
never funded.
on this
by
one. We both just
Republican
fucking.
They should.
I'm like, I'm
not be
hoping
going
you
to
pick up
jail
on what I'm doing.
for a drug
I'm trying
and
to
alcohol
just-
problem. They should be going
Like I'm
into
desperately
treatment.
trying to just
Treatment.
divert the
That's
conversation
what
away
we've
from
been
this.
trying
This
to
is-
do. That's what I'm going to get done because I think maybe the American people have now seen that, in fact, it was a mistake to pass those laws relating to drug. But they were not in the crime bill.
But
Okay,
why
so-
didn't he get it done? See, it's all talk, no action with these politicians. Why didn't he
You're
get
a
it done?
politician
That's what I'm
now,
gonna do when
Donald.
I become president. You were vice
Like,
president along with Obama
yeah,
as your president.
by all
You
means,
were there
before
for 8
before
years.
2016,
Why didn't you get it
no,
done?
you weren't a
had 8 years
politician.
to get it done.
You're the
Now saying
fucking
you're gonna get it done
president.
because
You are a
you're all
politician
talk
now.
and no action, Joe.
We got a
been
lot of
for
it
4
done.
years.
We released
You didn't get
38,000. We
anything
got
done.
38,000 prisoners left from the.
You got nothing done.
38,000 prisoners were released from federal prison. There were over 1,000 people who were given clemency.
I like to
In
imagine under his
fact,
jacket,
we're
Trump's
the
collar
ones who
just
put in the
keeps going.
legislation saying we could look at pattern and practice of police
Like a
departments and
clown
what they were
pattern,
doing,
you know?
how they were conducting themselves. I could go on.
Do we,
But
John?
we began the process.
Oh, yeah.
We began the process. We lost an election. That's why I'm running to win back that election and change his terrible policy.
I
Quick
just
response,
asked,
and then we're
I
gonna
just
move
asked
on
one
to climate
question.
change.
Why didn't you do it in the 8 years, a short time ago? Why didn't you do it? You just said, I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. You put tens
Because-
of thousands of mostly black young men in prison. Now you're saying you're going to to undo that. Why didn't you get it done? You had 8 years with Obama.
Why don't you do it?
You know why, Joe? Because you're all talk and no action.
All right, Vice President
Because
Biden, and then we're going to move on to the next section.
We had a Republican Congress. That's the answer.
Well,
Okay.
you got to talk them into it, Joe.
All
Sometimes
right.
you got to talk them into it.
Why
move on
would
to our
no
next
no?
section,
Like I
which
did
is
with
you.
criminal
Why do you have to
justice
talk
reform.
someone
I had to talk
into
Democrats
being
into it.
more
Gentlemen,
lenient
we're
on people of
running out
color,
of time, so we
Donald?
got to get on to climate change, please. You both have very different visions
don't
on
get onto climate change.
President Trump, you say that environmental regulations have hurt jobs in the energy sector. Vice President Biden, you have said you see addressing climate change as an
Climate change
opportunity
regulations
to
have
create
hurt
new
jobs in the polluting
For each
sector.
of you, how would you both combat climate change and support job growth at the same time?
I'm
Starting
very
with you,
concerned
President Trump.
about the making
You
the
have 2
planet
minutes
hotter
uninterrupted.
industry.
So we have the Trillion Trees program. We have so many different programs.
So
I
many
do love the environment,
programs.
but what I want is the
I'm going to
cleanest,
start an auction right now.
crystal
Who wants to
clear
bid on this
water,
right
the
now?
cleanest
Let's
air.
go. $1
We
starting
have the
$1,
best,
$1,
lowest
$1.
number in carbon emissions, which is a big standard that I notice Obama goes with all the time. Not Joe. I haven't heard Joe use the term because I'm not sure he knows what it represents or means, but I have
Yeah,
heard
Joe
Obama
Biden's
use it.
never said the
And
words
we have
carbon emissions.
the best carbon
Believe me.
emission numbers that we've had in 35 years. Under
You know
this
that somebody said carbon
administration,
emissions to
we
him
are
yesterday for the
working
first
so well
time. He's
within
like, that
it.
sounds good.
Here's
I've
what
never
we
heard that
can't
before.
do.
I'll use it.
I'm going to use it,
How
yeah.
filthy it is. Look at Russia. Look at India. It's filthy. The air is filthy. The Paris Accord, I
India.
took us
It's
out
filthy.
because we were
Vote
going to
for
have
me.
to spend trillions of dollars, and we were treated very unfairly. When they put us in there, they did us a great disservice. They were going to take away our businesses. I will not sacrifice tens of millions of jobs, thousands
I
and
won't
thousands
sacrifice
of
a single
companies
business
because
to
of
save the planet.
The Paris Accord. It
I
was so
refuse to do
unfair.
it.
China doesn't kick in until 2030.
But-
Russia goes back to a low standard, and we kicked in right away. It would have destroyed our businesses. So, you ready? We have done an incredible
I think
job
our businesses will be
environmentally.
much better when they're
Have
all
the cleanest
underwater.
air, the cleanest water, and the best carbon emission standards that we've seen in many, many years.
So they'll have to longer pay
President
for
Biden.
We haven't
water
destroyed our
service.
industries.
I switched to a
Vice President
low-carb
Biden, 2
diet
minutes
to
to
reduce
you,
my carbon
uninterrupted.
footprint.
Climate change and climate warming, the global warming, is an existential threat to
Oh,
humanity.
Biden, come on, get through a sentence.
We have a moral obligation to deal with it. And we're told by all the leading scientists in the world we don't have much time.
Like I feel,
We're gonna
I
pass
feel
the
for
point of no
Biden,
return
right? Because
within the
he
next
does
8 to
legitimately
10
have
years.
like a
4 years of
diagnosed
this man
stutter,
eliminating
like
all
a
the
speech impediment.
regulations that were
The
put in
problem
place
is,
to clean up
like
the climate,
the problem is
to
that
clean up,
you and I
to
know
limit
this. Most
limit of emissions will
reasonable
put us
people
in a
know
position
this,
where we're going to
right?
be in real trouble.
There's
Here's
a
where we have
certain
great opportunity.
population.
I was able to
We're
get
going to look
both
at that and say,
all the
"Oh,
environmental
he doesn't know how to
organizations as well
talk.
as
He has a
labor.
mental
Yeah,
deficiency."
People worried about jobs.
No,
And Trump's
he has
been
speech
exploiting
impediment.
that
My climate
greatly.
plan. Because what it does, it will create millions
difficult.
of new, good-paying jobs. We're going to
I mean,
invest
I don't even think
in, for
Biden's like a
example,
particularly amazing
500,000,
candidate. He's just not a monster,
50,000
you know?
charging
Like, that's-
stations on our highways.
Like, yeah, he,
I'll
that we
he's
take
can
it.
demonstrably not a piece of shit.
Like, we're going to be in a position
I
where we're
will
going
have
to
that,
see to
please.
it that we're going to take 4 million
I mean, at this point,
existing
I'll
billion
vote for the piece of shit
buildings
over
and
Trump.
2 million existing
But-
homes and retrofit them so they
Well,
don't
I'm
lose
not
much
gonna be a
energy,
piece of
saving
shit.
hundreds of
When-
millions
when-
But at
when
least
I say
I'm not
piece of shit,
separating
oil
children from
in
their
the
families.
process and creating
when I say piece of shit, I don't mean Joe Biden. What I
And
mean
by
is
the
the
way,
literal
the whole
piece of
idea
shit.
of what this is all going to do.
If
is
you put
going
a
to
piece of
create
shit on a
millions
podium,
of jobs.
I'm voting
It's
for
going
that.
to clean the environment.
Okay,
Our health
so
and our
any
jobs
functional
are
adult,
at stake.
2020.
That's what's happening. And what right now, by the way, Wall Street firms indicated that my plan will in fact create 18.6 million jobs, 7 million more than his. This is from Wall Street. And
Joe, you spent a whole debate saying Wall Street's not good.
On climate, just on the economy.
Don't cite them now.
It's just literally
And said
say,
very strongly,
I will not deliberately hurt people
$6,500
as
will be taken
president.
away from families under his plan. That his plan is an economic disaster. If you look at what he wants to
Surely
do,
he
you know,
is
if you
audience
look
must
at
figure
his
out this is all he does.
environmental plan, you know who developed it? AOC plus
This
3.
guy's bad.
They know nothing about the climate. I mean, she's got a good line of stuff, but she knows nothing about the climate. And they're all hopping
got a good
through
line of
hoops
stuff.
for
Is
AOC
AOC his
plus
coke
3.
dealer?
Look, Their real power costs
AOC is
$100
Elise
trillion.
or
If we had the
Alexandria
best year in the history
Oh, I
of
know,
our
I
Ocasio-Cortez.
know.
For
But
100 years,
he was like,
we
she's got a
would
good line of stuff.
not even come close to
I think he was
going
gonna say she's got a nice ass, and then was like, no, wait, I can't
want
say
to take
that.
buildings down because they want to make bigger
No,
windows
he
into smaller
reserves that talk
windows.
for his
As far
daughter.
as they're concerned, if you had no window, it would be a lovely thing. This is the craziest.
No,
plan
I
that
didn't
anybody
mean to
has
do
ever
it,
seen.
but
And
I
this
came
wasn't
across
done
this
by
video of
smart
basically a
people.
compilation of
This
all the
wasn't
weird
done
things
by
that Trump
anybody.
has said
Frankly, I don't even know how it
about
could
his
be good
daughter.
politically.
And,
they
like-
want to spend
And here's
I
the
didn't mean to do it
$1 trillion.
on
That's
Pornhub
their real
with
number.
a
He's
bottle
trying
of
to
lotion.
It's $100 trillion. They want to knock down buildings and build new buildings.
I'm going
with
to
little,
kick this down to
tiny,
0.5
small windows.
speed.
I mean,
And
many other things. And many other things.
Let me have the Vice President
It
respond,
is
and we're running out of
crazy.
time, and we have a lot
And
more
you'll
questions to
destroy
get
our
to.
country.
So let's hear from the Vice President. I have a number more questions.
I don't know where he comes from.
Like Planet.
where he
I
comes
don't
up with these
understand
$100
where he
trillion.
comes from. Like,
Give me a break. This plan was, this is plans endorsed by every major environmental group and every labor group. Labor, because they know the future lies. The future lies in us being able to breathe, and they know they're
The
good
future
jobs in getting us
lies
there. And by the
in
way, the
having
fastest
oxygen.
industry in America
Right, he's not.
is the electric, solar
Biden,
energy.
I
and
will
wind.
not
He thinks
accelerate
wind
the
causes
destruction
cancer,
of the
windmills.
earth.
It's the fastest growing jobs, and they pay good prevailing wages, $45, $50 an hour.
Oh my God,
we
we're doomed.
can grow and we can be cleaner if we
fucking
go the
doomed.
route I'm proposing.
President Trump,
Excuse me.
please
We are
respond, and then I have
we
some
are
follow-ups.
energy independent for the first time. We don't
We
need
could
all of
vote
these
for the
countries that
slightly
we had
old
to
man
fight
who doesn't
war
want to
over because
destroy
we
the
needed their
planet.
energy.
Or the
We're
goblin.
energy independent. I know more about wind than you do. It's extremely
Goblin sent
expensive.
from hell to
Kills all the
torment us.
birds. It's very intermittent. Got a lot of problems.
hell that I
The
now
windmills
believe
both
in
Germany and
because of
China.
this man.
And the fumes coming up, if you're a believer in carbon emission,
Your
the fumes
name-
coming up to make these
The
massive
name
windmills
Goblin
is more
who
than
wants to-
anything that we're talking about
wants
with
to set
natural
up
gas, which is
carbon
very clean. One
spewing
other thing.
Find me a
factories
source
on
that
every
says
I
that.
love
street
solar,
corner
but solar
and sleep
doesn't
with his
quite have it
daughter.
yet.
These
It's
are
not
our
powerful
choices.
yet to really run our big, beautiful factories that we need to compete
Has anybody-
with the world.
Has anybody
So,
tried getting Trump
it's
to
all
say
a
his name
pipe dream.
backwards yet?
But you know what we'll do? We're going to have the greatest economy in the world. But if you want to kill
You
the
say he's
economy,
Mr. Mixaplex?
get rid of your
Oh,
oil industry.
Rumpelstiltskin.
You want, and what about fracking?
All right,
Now-
let me,
now we
let
have
me,
to
have,
ask
let me
so
allow
hard
Vice
he puts
President Biden
into-
to
I've
respond.
never said I oppose fracking.
You said it on tape.
I did show the tape. Put it on your website.
I'll put it on.
Put it on the website. The fact of the matter is
Showed
he's
it last
flat lying.
Would you
Flat-
rule out banning fracking?
I do rule out banning
Here was a
fracking
tape
because
called
the answer
Battlestar Galactica.
we need other industries to transition to get to ultimately a complete zero emissions by 2025. What I will do with fracking over time is make sure that we can capture the emissions from the fracking, capture the emissions from gas. We can do that, and we can do that by investing money
love
and doing
everybody's
it.
gonna
But
go
it's a
like,
transition to this.
I can't
I
be
have one
seen
more
to say
question
I
in
will
this
ban
pod, and then
fracking.
we have-
He
That
was
thing
against
that causes
fracking. He said it.
earthquakes.
I will show that to you tomorrow. I am against fracking. Until
The
he gets
thing that
nominated,
causes
went to
tap
Pennsylvania.
water to get lit on
But you know
fire.
what, Pennsylvania? He'll be against it very
Yeah,
soon
no,
because his
don't
party
ban
is
fracking.
totally against it.
Fracking on federal land, I said. No fracking
You said-
and or
Look,
oil
you
on
didn't say
federal
Let
land.
me ask
I know there's not a lot of people
question
watching this
in
stream,
section,
but once
and
again,
then
I will
wanna move on
speak
to our final section.
from a
President
personal
Trump, people of
experience,
color
right?
are much
I live in
more likely to live
Wisconsin,
near oil
in a certain
refineries
region of
and
Wisconsin that
chemical
happens to be
plants. In
very
Texas, there are families
rich
who worry the
in a
plants near
specific
them
type
are
of
making them
sand
sick.
that they
Your
use
administration has
in
rolled back
fracking.
regulations
Right?
on
We
these
don't have
kinds of
fracking
facilities. Why should
here
these families
in
get
Wisconsin,
another 4 years in office?
but
The
we have the
families that we're talking
sand
about
that
are
they use for
employed
the
heavily,
fracking,
and they're
right?
making a lot of money, more money
These
than they've
sand
ever
mines
made.
that they have
If you
opened
look
up
at the kind of
have
numbers that we produce for
decimated
Hispanic, for Black,
every
for Asian, it's 9
ecosystem
times greater the percentage
surrounding
gain
them.
than it was
Yeah.
under
They-
in 3
they
years
have
than it was
just the
under
mining for the
8 years.
sand
of the
alone
two
for
of them,
fracking
to put it
has
nicely.
decimated
9 times
like
more. Now,
beautiful landscape, by the way.
somebody
You know,
lives- I
just
have not
if you
heard
want to
the
look about just
numbers or the
aesthetics, right?
Statistics that you're
Decimated
saying, but they're
landscapes,
making
right?
a
Now,
tremendous amount
once
of
like
money
verdant,
economically. We
beautiful,
saved it.
rolling
and I saved
hills
it again a number of
are
months
now
ago
just
when oil was crashing
brown
because of the
holes,
pandemic.
right?
We saved it. We got said we're going about
in about 20 years'
relationships.
time,
We got
we'll be
Saudi
living in a-
Arabia. Mexico, and Russia
Swiss
to
cheese
cut
planet
back
with
way
great-
back.
It'd be like
We
one of those
saved our
Mario
oil
Galaxy
industry,
planets where
and
you can
now
see
it's
all the way
very
through to the
vibrant.
car.
Again,
Right,
everybody
right,
has
right.
very
And then we're going, this
inexpensive
is just a
gasoline.
natural
Vice
cycle of
President
the
Biden,
Earth. You
your
know,
response.
a
We
few
didn't
ice
lose
ages,
any jobs.
a few
My
ice
response
ages
is
ago,
that those people
the
live
planet
on
had a
what they call
hole
fence
all the way
lines. She
going
doesn't
through it to the
understand
other
this.
side.
They
Dinosaurs fell
live
in. It's how they
near
died.
chemical plants that, in fact, pollute, chemical plants and oil plants and refineries that pollute. I used to live near that when I was growing up in Claymont, Delaware. And the more oil refineries in Marcus Hook and the Delaware River than there is any place, including in Houston at the time. When my mom get in the car and when there was first frost to
That
drive
better
me to
have been
school, turn in the
Scranton,
windshield, there'd
Claymont,
be oil
Delaware.
stuck in the window. That's why so many people in my state were dying and getting cancer. The fact is those frontline communities, it doesn't matter what you're paying them, it matters how you keep them safe. What do? And you impose restrictions on the pollutions the pollutants coming out of those fence line communities.
Okay, I have one final question.
Would he close
It
down
falls-
the oil industry?
It falls.
Would you close down the
falls-
oil
By the way, I
industry?
would transition from the oil industry, yes.
Oh,
I will
that's
transition.
a big statement.
It is a big statement
That's a big
because
statement.
I would stop
Why would you do that?
because the oil industry
We're all gonna
pollutes
die.
significantly.
I see.
Here's the deal, but
That's
you
a
can't
big
do
statement.
that. Well, if you let me finish the statement, because it has to be replaced by renewable energy
You just love
over
the
time,
lift.
over time. And I'd stop giving to the oil industry. I'd stop giving them federal subsidies. He won't give federal subsidies to the gas.
Ooh, that's an
to-
idea. I never thought of that. Ooh.
Wind.
Yeah.
Why are we giving it to oil industry?
We actually do
All
give
right.
it to solar and wind.
We
And
have
that's
one
maybe the
final
biggest
question.
statement in terms of business. That's the biggest statement.
Okay.
Because
We have
basically
one
what he's
final
saying
question.
Give
is
it
he
to
is
solar
going to
and wind. I
destroy
invest in them.
the oil industry. Will you remember that, Texas? Will you
Okay.
remember that, Pennsylvania, Oklahoma?
Vice President Biden, let me give you 10 seconds to respond, and then
Ohio.
I have to get to the final question. Vice President Biden.
He takes everything out of context. But the point is, look, we have to move toward a net zero emissions. The first place to do that by the year 2035 is in energy production, by 2050 totally.
All right. One
Is he
final
gonna get
question
China
to
to
both
do
of
it?
you. No, we're finished with
Is
this.
he
We have
going to
to
get
move on
China
to
to
our
do it?
final question. We
No,
have to
I'm
move
going
on
to
to our final
rejoin Paris
question.
Accord and make China abide by what they agreed to.
All right,
That'll
this
cost you
is
$1
about
trillion.
leadership, gentlemen. And this first question does go to you, President
rather
Trump.
we all die than
Imagine
spend $1
this is your
trillion.
inauguration day. What will you say in your address to Americans who did not vote for you? You'll each have 1 minute, starting with you, Mr.
We have to make our country totally successful as it was prior to the plague coming in from China. Now we're rebuilding it, and we're doing record numbers, 11.4 million jobs in a short period of time, et cetera. But I will tell you, go back.
Go back
Before the
to
plague
the
came in, just
previous
before, I was
administration,
getting
who did way
calls
better than
from
I
people
did.
that were not
Go back
merely
to
people
them.
that would call
Just
me.
think about
gonna
them.
wanted
take you
get
back to
together.
the
We had the
past.
best black unemployment numbers in the history of our country. Hispanic, women,
Angry businessman
Asian,
nerd.
people with diplomas, with no diplomas, MIT graduates, #1 in the class. Everybody had the best numbers. And you know what? The other side wanted to get together. They wanted to unify. Success is going to bring us together. We are on the road to success. But I'm cutting taxes, and he wants to raise everybody's taxes, and he wants to put new regulations on everything. He will kill it. If he gets in, you will have a depression, the likes of which you've never seen. Your 401ks will
And
go
the
to
only one
hell,
who will be able to
and
save
it'll be
his
a
name
very, very
is Robin
sad day
Hood.
for this country.
All right. Vice President Biden, same question to you. What will you say during your inaugural address to Americans who did not vote for you?
I will say, I'm an American president. I represent all of you, whether you voted for me or against me. And I'm going to make sure that you're represented. I'm going to give you hope. We're going to move. We're going to choose science over fiction. We're going to choose hope over fear. We're going to choose to move forward because we have enormous opportunities to make things better. We can grow this economy. We can deal with the systemic racism. And at the same time, we can make sure that our economy is being run and
We won't
moved and
all
motivated
die.
by clean energy, creating millions of new jobs. And that's the fact. That's what we're going to do. And I'm going to say, as I said at the beginning, what is on the ballot here is the character of this country: decency, honor, respect, treating people with dignity, making sure that everyone has an even chance. And I'm going to make sure you get that. You haven't been getting it the last 4 years.
All right. I want to thank you both
Big
for a very
dick
robust
swinging.
hour and a half of fantastic debate. Really appreciate it. President Trump, former Vice President Joe Biden, thank you to Belmont University for hosting us tonight. And most importantly, Thank you to those watching tonight. Election Day is November 3rd.
You're welcome.
Don't
You know,
forget
personal
to vote.
thank you there. Isn't that
Thank you,
sweet?
everyone, and have a great night.
She thanked me personally. I wish there was a hot mic right now. Fuck you! Just fuck you, Trump! Just...
He just leaps from the... Get over here! Don't touch me. Don't you fucking touch me.
Get your fucking greasy sausage.
She's got a matching mask and dress. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's lovely. It's a little anal, but it's lovely.
Don't touch me. Just get let go of my hand as quickly as you fucking can.
So fucking gross. God damn it, get away from me.
There you go. That was the presidential debate.
So, this was
have you changed your vote, John?
Oh yeah, no, I'm voting for a cute otter holding a guitar. It's exactly what we thought it was going to be, right? You had someone on one side who was using numbers. They were using figures and
you had
facts.
someone on the other side who was still learning their numbers.
Right. Like, the thing is that every time that Biden made a claim, he said who it was from.
Time to hear from you and get your reaction to this final debate of 2020.
Trump just made claims.
We're going to put the numbers up on the
we
screen.
didn't even do that. He just went, this guy,
202
he
is
is
the area
bad.
code for all of our numbers.
Yeah, like he was just throwing shit out there. Like he might as well said like this man is not a man. He is three skinless and furless mole rats in a suit. Like that's basically what he was saying. Like he was saying some ridiculous shit with nothing to back it up. The problem like, oh wow, it just skipped to CBS. Okay.
Yeah, mine did that too. I cancelled it in time, but I'm just looking at a load of recommended videos now.
I am kind of a little curious about what some of the talking heads have to say.
I think it was less chaotic than the first debate.
Oh, absolutely. You know.
So, you know,
and this is why you want to know why it was less chaotic, right? Is because the people didn't respond to it the way Trump thought they would.
Yeah,
right?
he thought he'd get the same thing he got out of Clinton.
Right. He thought that he was going into that election exactly like the same way he went in with Hillary, saying that if I am boisterous enough and I, take charge and no bullshit, and I'm gonna, I'm not your typical politician, and I'm just gonna say what's on my mind, people are gonna respond. The difference is that this time, as opposed to last time, people in America are facing, people in the world, I should say, are facing life and death situations. Like everyone in this country right now, I keep on saying this country, this world, everyone in the world right now is facing life and death, right? Because no one knows.
The first one was unwatchable. Oh yeah, the first one was atrocious.
Oh, and I watched it. I've watched all of them. I'm not a person for it.
Well, see, Trump got elected.
I did.
Trump got elected the first time. As much as people like to say, "Oh, he got elected because he wasn't a real politician" and stuff, or he was seen as not being a real politician. Trump got elected because people have bought into this idea that it doesn't really matter who you vote for because they're both just the same and everything just carries on as normal. Mm-hmm. And what people have realized is that's not true at all. Mm-hmm. They've had quite an unpleasant education, I guess.
And here's the thing, I don't want to sound like unpatriotic or whatever, but the U.S. has had it pretty fucking good for about 100 years, right? Like we've managed to skate by
and not get affected by pretty much any other major global issue, right?
Right.
We just kind of avoided it, right? This is the time, by the way, under a Trump administration where we got wrapped up into the same things that are happening to the rest of the world. And now Americans have to wake up and realize, like, oh shit, there's a life and death situation. Yeah. and that's the thing. And like the US, the people in the US are not accustomed to this idea that, hey, there is something lingering out there that could fucking kill me tomorrow that needs to be addressed, right? COVID is fucking deadly, right? And anyone is susceptible to it. No one is immune, right?
Well, talking about this thing now with like they're talking about this thing at the moment now with what they're calling long COVID, which is where you have it and you get to that state people would consider recovered, and then you get symptoms that they're like, well, this could last 10, 15 years, right? It's like permanent organ damage or...
people with neurological issues.
Yeah.
Right? Because, having something that damaging in your system is going to have lasting effects, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a doctor. I'm not. But even I can say, like, hey, if something is in your body that can shut down your respiratory system and your what's the system of your pituitary gland is part of?
They're basically discovering it can do brain damage, it can do permanent heart damage, it can do permanent lung damage. Do you know the first people to discover it were people who were athletes before they got it, like healthy exercise people. They got it, they recovered well, because that's the group that's most likely to recover. And then what they found is that people who had COVID and then recovered were getting into like cardiac and respiratory distress, or at least like not necessarily like distress, but like almost like they'd become more unfit, not just as a result of being sick. The capacity to run at the speeds and the extents they were able to before is now permanently reduced. And they were the first people that started, and that is the group you'd notice in first, the ones who start going jogging as soon as they're recovered. What does that do to somebody who wasn't an athlete before? Wasn't necessarily like pre-existing condition, but just wasn't an athlete,
Right. And this is what's on the line. Like, this is legitimately what's going on, is that we have a disease. We have a virus out there that's affecting the whole world, that's killing people in swaths, just taking people down.
Yeah.
And no, I don't think, that Joe Biden has a cure, but he has at least like an understanding of what this is. He respects the gravitas of what this is.
Og says, like, shingles from having chickenpox or sterility from mumps. Yes. People decided too early on that it was just the flu, and it's not. It's more like that. Yeah, and the thing is, if Biden had been president, America would probably still have got it, because pretty much everywhere got it, right? No country successfully headed it off, but like, I live in a country that has handled it atrociously. Particularly badly. I believe, I don't know if we still are, but there was a time there where we were second only to the US in deaths at a fraction of the US's size.
India jumped up there. Well,
India jumped up there. I think Brazil was doing quite badly for a while. I don't know. Italy.
Brazil's.
I think
Italy was first. Like, Italy was first, right? And like, I think Italy is like unfairly maligned because of it, but they were the first ones that got hit the hardest.
Yeah.
But if you look at them, they also kind of recovered.
The press
better.
The press in our country was really interesting, because when Italy had 10,000 cases, the press was saying, "Oh my God, this is a disaster. Is Italy on the verge of collapse?" And then when we hit 10,000 cases, they were going, "There's nothing to see here. It's fine. We got it under control. There's no what are we worried about?"
Yeah. Same here. like a lot of our press was going like, oh yeah, well, we're not Italy. Like Italy's a nightmare. Italy's a quarantine zone. Like it's like, dude, I'm banning all ye hope, when you enter Italy. Well, we know more than Italy. It's not that bad. It's not that bad.
Yeah, it's terrible. And like I'm still basically shielding here because I'm not vulnerable, but I live with someone who's vulnerable. And
right.
In Britain, it was difficult when that government advisor, Dominic Cummings, went to test his eyesight by driving from one end of the country to the other with his family in the car. Ever since then, the motivation to follow procedures has just gone. People just don't have it anymore.
Well, and here's the thing that no one in government, and definitely people in the general population, don't want to admit, is that we are influenced by our representatives more than we care to admit.
Right.
It's how many times have you thought in your head like, well, that person did it.
Yeah.
It's it's very easy to fall into that group where you go, oh well, they did it.
People don't seem to realize that trust in the government is fragile.
Mm-hmm.
And this was one of those situations where it needed to be maintained.
Yeah. I'm going to mute myself, but keep talking.
And particularly in Britain, what we found was people talked a big game about not trusting the government, but they were doing as they were told. And, there were lots of... Everybody, I think, has a story of, like, I lost a loved one and I couldn't even say goodbye to them. My aunt died. She didn't die from COVID, because it was... she was very sick before it really, really hit our area. But my aunt died and I couldn't go to the funeral because between her dying and the funeral happening, the restrictions got put in place. And like I say, we were shielding anyway, so it was a bit of a state. But, like, everybody has a story like that. And the truth is, people... there was...
I'm back.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
There was all that time between, say, like, the first restrictions started to go in like, March, right?
Mm-hmm.
To now, there was all that time for both our governments and a lot of other governments. Most places are doing okay, but a lot of places screwed it up. There was time between then and now to have so much prepared for when people just couldn't do it anymore, which is the point right now. People just can't do it with the same care that they did before. You can't maintain that level of vigilance.
Right. Well, and we're entering that period now, right? Where they even named it like as COVID fatigue.
Right.
Right. And there was a time period. There was when this first announced, like let's say March, right? Late March, early April. Right?
Yeah, we had the first rumors from China late December. Then around about the end of January, we're like, okay, this is starting to spread. February, other countries started to get it. March, people started going, okay, we're locking down.
Yeah. So I would say between March and June, this was the time period when you have to be hard-nosed, right? If you're a leader of a country, you have to be like, okay, this shit is real. It's dangerous. It's deadly. We don't know a lot about it yet, but we have to try to fucking do something, right? And we saw that there were countries who did this. New Zealand did this.
New Zealand did a terrific job.
Yeah, Japan did this.
She just won a landslide election as well, the Prime Minister of New Zealand.
Because of this.
Yeah.
Because she was one of the few, world leaders who went, okay, this is legit. Let's lock it the fuck down, right? And let's deal with this. Okay, and a lot of people say, okay, well, New Zealand has a much smaller population. Fair. That's fair, right? But let's say that we apply the same rules that they applied, and let's look at it with the same gravitas.
Having a bigger population means you have to do more, not less.
Right, exactly. Like, that's the thing, is that because you have a bigger population doesn't give you more leeway. It means you have to be stricter,
Yeah.
Like, it's frustrating because we had a chance. The world had a chance, right? And it was a 3-month period where every country in the world could have been like, okay, let's just take this seriously. That's all.
Yeah.
That's all it took. All you had to say was, we're going to take this seriously.
Right, and for those 3 months, most people were getting by, living indoors. There was almost like a camaraderie to it, a global. Imagine how much you could have done in that 3 months while everybody was just, and nothing was done.
Right. In those 3 months, if every country in the world, right, or let's not even say every country in the world, a majority of the countries of the
just
world,
the ones
right?
we live in would have been nice.
Right. If the countries we lived in, and let's say a majority, all kind of banded together, right, and we went, okay, this is legit. We got to address it. We're going to lock down. We're going to think, like, imagine what next year would have felt like, right? What would 2021 felt like? We're like, oh fuck, man! Remember March through June? What a weird time.
Yeah.
Right? What a weird time. What a weird 3 months out of our life.
Whereas, in all likelihood, we're still going to be doing this next March through June.
Right. Like, now we're looking at this conversation being like, hey, remember those 2 forgotten years? Like, like that's...
And people keep saying stuff like, oh, well, the lockdowns also are a medical thing because they cause depression and stuff. And that's true. Like, I'm not debating that for a moment. But
no,
until we stop the virus, we're going to have to do more. The only thing stopping doing any lockdowns is going to do, because you're concerned about those mental health things, is prolong it so we have to do more of them more often.
You know when we could have addressed the mental health issues and the ramifications of a lockdown?
In June?
July. In fucking July. We could have started addressing that. We could have started addressing the ramifications and the consequences of a lockdown. But no, we can't do that right now. We can't address that because we still have a fucking virus out there that's killing people by the thousands daily. Like,
yeah. And people
like,
talk
why
about
do I have to explain this to people? Why is this something that needs to be even debated? Thousands of people are dying daily, and you think that we're okay just going the way it is?
People say,
fuck
like,
you.
Yeah.
Like,
when people say stuff like, oh, like, it doesn't even affect 99% of people. Do you know what didn't affect 99% of people? 9/11.
The
Iraq
Holocaust.
War. The World War II. You know? Like, it didn't kill... But we still treat those things like they're big fucking deals, you know?
Right. You know why we treat them big deal? Because people are still fucking dying.
Yeah.
You know? Like,
I think somebody was saying that more people have...
Quit drawing the line in the sand at you.
So I was reading, I think earlier, that more people in the US have died from coronavirus than most of the wars the US has participated in. I don't think it was combined, but like it's got a higher death toll than I think everything except like World War II.
Right. But people in the US won't even admit to that because they weren't carrying a gun and there wasn't someone shooting at them. Right? They're, fuck this country, like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm at that point with the UK, honestly. Like, we lost. Do you know why we lost time? Because we were sorting out fucking Brexit still.
Right.
We could have asked for an extension. The EU said they'd have given us one if we asked. Like, we could have extended it till after this was over, and also worked with the EU cooperatively. Did you ever hear the story of what happened to the UK EU PPE deal, where the EU,
briefly I had heard about this, but
the EU worked out this deal where they were going to send PPE out, to masks and gear and stuff, to all the countries, and even though we left, they were willing to involve us in the deal, and one of our politicians responsible for that said he wasn't going to do it, right? And then he claimed, oh, the email about it went to the wrong email address. You're a fucking... This is supposed to be the British government dealing with the European Union.
Mm-hmm.
The email went to the wrong email address is not,
It's not valid.
It's...
You know? Like, okay, like, just to put this in context, right? I work in a place that has multiple departments. Everyone has their own email address. Do you think I could get away with saying something vital didn't happen because it went to the wrong email? No! I would be ran through the fucking ringer if that happened, right? Because you know what? Yeah, maybe the email was wrong. But as soon as I didn't get results, there's a phone. There is I could send a physical fucking letter to someone in my own building if I had to. There's means to do that in my facility.
Actually,
it's one building in a rural part of Wisconsin. And I could literally send a physical fucking letter to someone.
Yeah. I actually have a case of this happening. I used to work for a supermarket that I will not name. And
Sainsbury.
I'll name it. I have a friend who went to a different store and then lost his job because the store closed down. And he just transferred to that store, and then the store closed down a few weeks later, and he lost his job. And everybody was shocked that the store closed down. And then it turned out that the reason the store closed down is the person who was responsible for making sure that the manager got the renewal for the store's alcohol license did not send the email on properly. And so the store has the alcohol license. The manager has the alcohol license, not owned by the company, it has to be owned by a person. So, without knowing, for about 6 weeks, they were selling alcohol without a license. And that person who was responsible for doing that and didn't got fired. Not like a warning. He got fired.
Well, okay. No, exactly what you're saying, right? So this happened before I even entered the department in question, right? So for those who don't know, I work at a casino, right? Before I was even in the department, this happened. Some miscommunication happened where people basically set up a group of slot machines wrong. And they were paying out more than they should have been, right? It was just a simple matter of miscommunication, right? No one went out of their way to do this. No one was deliberately trying to do this because there was no benefit to it. There's literally no benefit to doing this if you're the person, right? But
you legally have to display
a group
the
of
odds,
machines
right?
Well, yeah, you're supposed to display the odds. You have to display the odds.
What I'm saying is, it's not even about the fact that the casino displayed money. There's a legal compliance to it.
Right.
Even if the odds on the machine are more favorable, you still have to...
It wasn't a case of like, oh, this is better for the casino, right? Because this was actually legitimately not beneficial to the casino, right?
You still have to... The odds you post still have to be correct, even if it's not to your benefit.
Right.
The mistake.
So the mistake was that we were actually paying out people too much, right? The mistake that was made was this banking machine was paying people too much money.
Right.
Everyone involved with that situation was fired, let go, to the point where
and they were like, suckers, we've been playing those slot machines all day.
The department in question was at a severe detriment, right? They ran the risk of not being operationally functional because they lost so many people to this, right? But that was deemed a worthy sacrifice, right? Where this department might not function without all these people, but we still have to get rid of these people because of the harm they've done.
Politics is literally the only job where you can't do that, where it doesn't happen.
And it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way. Like, if
It's
you've
terrible.
done enough harm, right? Whatever you have to offer is null and void.
Right.
Right? If you are guilty of doing so much wrong, whatever you can offer in return doesn't fucking matter. It just doesn't.
It's not even a case of like in this country you can't fire an MP from being an MP, right? If someone's elected, you have to wait till the next election. They have to be dead or they have to resign because they've been elected. It's a democratic process. But you can still fire them from your party. You can still remove them from the job you have given them, you know? But they don't even do that. That's madness. Oh, because like the guy in charge of Android for Google wasn't fired after serious sexual assault charges because they tried to hide it behind binding arbitration. That's one of those things where they've become so comfortable with the idea that no one will ever find out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, okay. Let's talk about this, right? Let's talk about like that situation in particular. Let's even bring it closer to home. Rooster Teeth, okay? They just had a huge fucking scandal involving sexual harassment, right? Ryan Haywood, he was one of their premier talents, right? He was one of the hosts of Achievement Hunter, which is a subsidiary of Rooster Teeth, right? One of the 5 main personalities was found out to be engaging in some sexual harassment and assault, right? He was using his position as being a public figure to groom and draw fans into sex, right? That's what he was found to be doing. And as this is start to be uncovered, and it's still ongoing, right? You learn that there's a pattern. There's a pattern to this. It's basically an MO at this point. Like how he engaged the people, what he said, the things he did to basically convince fans that they should give him sex was a routine. It was almost like
not that it massively makes it better, but we're not just talking about like one poor choice in a single sequence of events in one sort of one-sided relationship, which you can. I'm not saying that's okay either. You can ascribe that to like an ignorance or a.
Sure.
I'm not saying that's a defense, but there is a difference between that and a demonstrably repeated pattern of behavior over and over and over
again.
Right,
and to support that point, right? We're not talking about this is just his first year, right? Like his first year as being a internet personality. This is ongoing behavior, right? When to the point where he should be familiar with the dynamics of his personality and how it affects fandom, right?
Right.
Like at a certain point now it becomes a willful act. This is what it becomes, right? Where you have an internet personality who may be unfamiliar with the interactions between celebrity and fandom, right? But then you get to a point where it can no longer be ignorance, right? This has to be a willful act because there's been enough examples of people doing it wrong that you should learn, right? You should learn.
A lot of people plead ignorance on this, but like, so I'm a pretty small YouTuber, right?
Yeah.
But one of the things you learn when you start to accumulate any kind of audiences, without even getting into like sexual things, because that's I'm thrilled to say, like, I'm in a relationship, I'm not out there seeking that, and I've never had people bring it to me either as an issue. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
It's not a concern I've ever had. It's nothing I've ever had to worry about, gratefully. But one of the things you learn when you have an audience, particularly online, where everyone's kind of anonymous, you don't know anybody's ages, you often don't know people's genders,
Right.
And you are not famous, but you're a figure who has a platform, has a profile. You learn that people will often be not inappropriate, but unduly swayed by you or eager to please you in a way that is not necessarily healthy in like a stream situation. So you soon become aware, for example, that people will agree with you a bit more than people in when that dynamic doesn't exist agrees with you, or they'll go to great efforts to tell you things you want to hear, or they'll go to great lengths to it's just a common thing when you have an audience. You have a certain section of people that want to be your favorite. They want to be, and I've always kept those people at a distance because I'm very cautious of it. I don't think you can actually do the job without being aware that there's a certain type of fan that wants to please you in return for being a special fan, right? That dynamic is obvious, and it's not something that creeps up on you. It's not something, I don't personally feel it's something where you see it and you go, oh, I didn't know they felt like that.
Right.
I think it's very obvious, and you have to be very, very careful about it.
So, for example, like me, right? I absolutely don't even have come close to the YouTube presence that you have, or any of the bigger names, like a Jacksepticeye or a Game Grumps or a.
Sure, I'm a tiny YouTuber, by the way.
Sure, and I'm even smaller compared to you, right? Like any sort of YouTube clout I have either is because of you, or or the very tiny Not Biscuits channel that we run, right? But even I was like, okay, going into this, I'm like, okay, I have to be conscious of people agreeing with me.
Right.
Yes, very, very, very much so that, yes, these people may have these opinions that line up with mine, right? Because that's generally how social interactions work, where like-minded ideologies tend to flock together. That just happens.
As you become... sorry, go on.
But there is that subsect of those groups who are saying, I'm agreeing with you because you are you. You know, that's where it gets dangerous, right? It's I'm agreeing with someone because of who they are. And I think
because they think there'll be something back for them.
Right, yeah. That there's some sort of personal gain, either sexually, monetarily, or socially,
right,
for having that position. And I think we see that a lot with what Org says, with like the Google employees who are using their position as being a Google employee for sexual favor, or Ryan Haywood from Achievement Hunter using his position, boss. Or being the fucking president of the United States. Like,
yeah, it's difficult. And the thing is, when stuff like that can sneak up on you. But if you have any kind of profile, by the time you've got to the exchanging sexual favors stage, you're past the point of claiming you don't know, I think.
Right.
I don't think it's that much of a surprise. I think people who...
Right.
I think people who do that, I don't think it's a case that they don't know. I think it's a case that they don't care, or they don't see it as wrong. That's
right.
my issue. personally.
This always has to go into degrees of severity, right? Where, I mean, like, okay, this is gonna sound fucking weird, but like the minimum wage employee at McDonald's, right, as opposed to the supervisor at McDonald's who makes 10 cents more to them than an hour, right? They're probably able to find more common ground, right? There's not as much of a divide between them or a power structure set up where they can leverage a lot over them, right? You still have to be conscious of it, right? You still have to be conscious of it. You have to be wary of it. But ultimately, the impact is not going to be as severe as, like, let's say, a CEO of McDonald's with a 9-to-5 minimum wage worker at McDonald's, right? Like, there are degrees.
I guess it's I suppose to me it's the extent to which you are a colleague.
Right.
Like
how much are you guys working together as much as you are directing someone's work?
And does that person really dictate whether or not you're likely to get a promotion?
Right. It's a case of what ability does this person have to benefit you in the long run, right?
Yeah, I think
because that exists. Like, unfortunately, that exists. There are people in this world that have the ability to make certain people's lives better or worse depending on their say.
Well, this is the thing when people who are like defending Louis C.K. by saying, well, all he did was like ask people if he could take his dick out and then he did it. You know what I mean? But nobody ever talks about the fact that he did stuff like made it harder for them to get work if he thought they were going to make a fuss.
Right.
I mean, what he did was wrong no matter what. But he also exercised power over their careers.
Right, exactly. Like, because you have to look at it in a situation like, okay, maybe he's not in a position where he can, like, say yay or nay about someone getting a role, right? But if you can say, hey, I have the endorsement of Louis C.K., like,
something else too.
What effect does that have on someone's career?
Well, there's something else too. Imagine you're casting a pilot, and Louis C.K. is in it, and then you're the person who decides who's playing, I don't know, the young reporter who's interviewing him, and it's one of those women, and Louis C.K. goes, well, if you hire her, I'm not doing it at all. Who are you going to keep?
Yeah, exactly. Like the power dynamics are never cut and dry.
And what does it do for your career if some rich, influential, successful guy goes around telling everybody that you're a liar who makes false accusations too? Nobody's going to want you around, you know?
Right. And I mean, exactly. Like, what does that do for you if you are the one person who calls out a beloved? Like, okay, well, look at the Bill Cosby situation, right?
Oh, I think Cosby's the best example, without a doubt.
Like, look at the Cosby situation. If only one person ever came out with accusations Cosby,
he would be free today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Andrew, I think he is free today, isn't he? I don't know if he's out.
I don't know what the situation was.
I think
he has fallen so out of public consciousness. I'm pretty sure people remember his chocolate cake routine more than his accusations at this point. But yeah, the Cosby. If only one person ever came out and said, "Hey, Cosby did this,"
It would never have been enough.
Never would have been enough, right? But the fact that multiple people came out and said something, that's when it became an issue, right? Because suddenly you have enough people with enough people behind them believing them, where it becomes an impact on the percentages.
And Cosby, what's remarkable, I think, about Cosby, and it kind of tells you how bad the situation is I don't want to detail it, but the specific crimes he was committing, not that it is ever really deniable, but they were so far from these crimes where people go, well, you know, there's room for confusion there, you know? Like, he was explicitly, like, luring people and drugging them before raping them. And,
right,
you know, there's no... Even most hardened, like, victim blamer has no defense for that, rightly so. And yet, yet it was still something he got away with for years, you know?
Right. Because, okay, so the biggest issue always comes down to patterns, right? It's patterns and routines. That's always going to be the damning thing. And I don't mean to say this as like, okay, if you want to get away with this, do this. I don't mean that like that. What I'm saying is that if there's a pattern and a routine in the action, that's what's going to get the person, right?
Well, I mean, there's a very specific reason where if you're someone who committed the same type of crime the same type of way over multiple years, and you get caught and you go to jail, those are the people who are least likely to get released.
Right. So what I'm absolutely. So I'm getting at here, I'm trying to make it full circle, right? Is that yes, we had a pattern and a routine with Cosby. If you look into the accusations and things that are said, we have a pattern and a routine with Ryan Haywood from Achievement Hunter.
Yeah.
When you look at the accusations, there's a pattern and a routine with the abuses that Trump is guilty of. And if we even look at this debate that we just spent 2 hours watching, there is a pattern and a routine of how he responded to the things that Biden said, right? Those are the two things, pattern and routine, right? When there's a pattern and a routine to someone's actions, that makes them pathological. That means that there is something flawed. There's something flawed and wrong with their mentality as it relates to society's norms and mores.
This is why, for example, not to go on my usual prison abolition thing, but I'm a big believer in I'm a big believer in non-punitive justice.
Sure.
But whenever I talk about this, I always get this thing where people go, oh, so you think we should just do nothing about rapists? I'm like, no. On the contrary, I think we should do significantly more than we're currently doing.
Yeah,
I'm just of the view that we also need to acknowledge that there are people who are incapable of correcting their behavior. And that punishing those people has much less value than recognizing that fact.
Right. And see, here's the thing, is that everyone, like a lot of people, and I don't blame people for having this viewpoint. I get it. I understand. I've been in a position where I've wanted someone who has wronged me to suffer, right? That is a normal, that is a human response to being wronged, right?
Right.
But at a certain point, you have to look beyond that and go, okay, this person wronged me, right? Sure, maybe they are punished for that, but that doesn't mean that I wasn't wronged. That doesn't make my life better in this moment?
For
What
me,
would
it's,
make
it's like, does the fact that you are wronged give you the right to establish an entire system of inflicting wrongs on others on an industrial scale?
right?
Is my personal catch of it. I mean, like, I wouldn't care if Trump went to jail. I wouldn't be sad for Trump.
Right.
But I
at
also
the same
don't think
time,
any good would come of it, particularly.
Right. Like, the only good that would come of Trump going to jail is that for a brief amount of time, he couldn't inflict more harm.
Right.
While he was there.
It does
Hopefully.
It does do the thing
you
of
know,
people saying, oh, well, there are consequences to bad actions. But I think, actually, societal shame is a more potent consequence. Having everybody see you and refuse to... But then when you're very rich. But
Sure.
take away his wealth, you know?
Yeah,
people who need it.
Like, I think there are two legitimate ways to harm a person, right? Like, legitimate retribution, right? It's one, attack their wealth, right? Attack their possessions and their ability to obtain possessions.
Right.
Okay? The other is their standing, their societal standing.
Yeah.
Those are the two. Right?
Well, it's like if you look at someone like...
it doesn't matter.
If you look at,
you know?
If you look at someone like Epstein, right? Epstein went to jail twice.
I'm going to mute myself again real quick, but keep talking.
Okay, so Epstein went to jail twice. The first time he went to jail, he walked it. He made cushy deals because he had all his money and he had managed to keep it fairly quiet. He absolutely walked his jail sentence and he came out just as rich as he went in, having lost no social standing and no money, but having had some legal consequences, and he absolutely walked it. The second time he went to jail, he was absolutely exposed. It was made completely clear that who he was. He lost all his social standing overnight, and it was clear that if and when he got out of jail, he wouldn't be making any more new money, and he would probably lose a lot of his wealth. And he immediately killed himself.
Depending on what conspiracy theory you believe.
True. That's what I mean when I say it's a more potent punishment. I don't think he should have killed himself, but
I mean, like, and here's my thing: like, if you do ascribe to any conspiracy theory, what you're looking at then is not necessarily he was punished for his ability to obtain wealth. He was then killed because he affected someone else's ability to obtain wealth.
Yeah.
You know, that's what it comes down to. Like, regardless of what conspiracy theory you believe, it still comes down to it affected someone's ability to hold power and wealth.
Yeah. So I have a few, like, key principles that I think are really important. I don't think any human being, no matter what they've done, should be made homeless, or made to starve, or made to endure dehumanizing conditions.
Or killed?
Or killed. That's a good one, yes. I don't believe in the death penalty. I don't believe in forcing people to be homeless. I don't believe in forcing people to go to jail. And I don't believe in torturing people physically or psychologically, and I think prison very often qualifies as torture.
Sure.
So I just don't think it's right to inflict those things on people under any circumstances, even if they've done terrible things. And the truth is, we have a situation where people go into prison and come out worse people than they went in because it's torture, really. So I will never get to the point where I will say, like, I believe in prison abolition, except for this guy who sucks, because I just don't think it ever works. But people always take this to mean that I am therefore soft on crime, whereas the alternative seems to be send people to prison, but don't do anything about people like Trump. Don't do anything about people like Epstein, who only got caught because of Trump. Don't do anything about people like, I'd like to dehumanize people less and do substantially more to remove people who exploit others from positions of power. You know, that's my thing.
Well, when you deal with like criminal justice, right? There is the sensible approach, and like, okay, yeah, sensible is suggesting a bias. Sure. Okay. There's a sensible approach where it's okay. Someone commits a crime. That means that their brain isn't in line with social norms or mores, right? So you try to rehabilitate, right? Bring them in line with social mores and norms, okay? Like that's what rehabilitation means, right? You just want to bring someone to the point where they are willing to act under those guidelines. Okay? Or the other approach is you have to take a hard line to every single crime, right? Regardless of severity. And that is not sensible. You know, like the only way that you are not a hypocrite is that if you're willing to kill someone for jaywalking.
And the places that do that, what you find is that it has the opposite effect. People become numb to the idea of consequences.
Yeah.
You know, there are places on this planet where you can get the death penalty for what we would consider relatively minor crimes. Mm-hmm. And the result is people commit those crimes significantly more. Yeah. Because there is no... The attitude becomes, well, you might as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. If you are facing a reality where you can be killed for the most minor of offenses, then you might as well just go out and commit as many of those offenses as you can, because eventually they'll catch you, whether you want them to or not.
In China, you can receive the death penalty for killing someone through dangerous driving, right?
Sure.
China has some of the most dangerous drivers and the most accidents in the world and terrible regulation of the roads because it becomes unpoliceable at that point.
Yeah.
And of course, whenever there's an accident, nobody stops now because why would you risk it?
Sure. And the same thing where it's like, right, if you have a fender bender, why would you stop?
Yeah.
You know, because someone could extrapolate what you've done into murder.
Yeah. And I think one of the difficulties is people say, well, you know, there are some people who will never get better. So what are you going to do? Let them off the hook? And I think the big mistake when it comes to stuff like this is people equate, I don't believe in prisons as a punishment, to I don't think you should ever confine someone, you know? But we confine people in hospitals currently who aren't in prison. We just recognize they're a danger. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think Dharma would ever have been safe to release, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that's a contradiction in principle. But I've talked many times about how I'm fascinated by Dharma. Because I think he's the serial killer of all the serial killers.
Wisconsin native.
Committed some of the worst crimes imaginable. He's the serial killer who I think most highlights the need for prison abolition and stuff like that. Because do you know what's something interesting about serial killers? And this is something that I think it really plays into the prison abolition argument, even though people think serial killers don't. Serial killers usually go through a time period before they kill someone where they go through what they call like a fantasy, the beginning of a fantasy cycle, which is they don't start off wanting to kill people specifically. They start off thinking it would be exciting or you know, arousing or whatever their particular thing is. They start off thinking about it, and they go through a process where they're like, I mean, I'm never gonna do it, you know?
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's something bad people do. I'm not a bad person. It's never gonna happen. But I could, you know? And they think about it, and they think about it more and more, and it becomes a compulsion. And then eventually, they do, right?
Right.
The gap between serial killers' victims, very, very frequently you'll see that the gap between the first and the second is the biggest. Because what happens after that is they feel remorse. Not all serial killers are sociopaths who have no guilt. Very frequently, after the first victim, there'll be a huge gap. In Dahmer's case, there's a huge gap where he doesn't kill again for a very long time. And I often think, like, what must that have felt like? To know you'd killed someone, and to not do it again, you clearly have your conscience in place in some form. And my thing is, someone like that who's already killed a person and worries that they might do it again, if you have a system where that person has a path back to humanity without it being total condemnation for the rest of their life, you increase the chances of that person turning themselves in, I think.
Right. Because exactly, like, okay, if this is going to sound horrible, but let's be fair. Me and Owen have just...
This entire conversation is horrible.
Right. We have just destroyed any chance you and I have at holding public office, right? Like, we've done this, right? We just eliminate that thought from your head. But no, Owen's right? Because if you know that the path forward, if you are a serial killer, right? Or if you are a killer at all, if you know that some action you've done has led to the death of a person, all you have to do is look at what criminal justice systems are, both in this country and in the UK, and realize that, oh, if I turn myself in, if I try to make myself better, if I try to cure myself from this weird thing in my life, will lead to my basically damnation and incarceration to the end of my life, why not just keep going?
Right.
You know, like that's basically the bargain or negotiation you have to make with yourself.
And
right?
after that first time, when it's such a shock and you probably do feel kind of terrible or unexpected, it's very, very easy to tell yourself, well, it's not going to happen again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's already been, I've already done it. Like, I can't bring that person back.
Right. And there's no way to make amends, right? There's no legal...
There's no route home. There's no route back to social acceptance. My best progress is to suffer in silence and to do the best going forward. And it does make you wonder how many people have done that. I'm willing to bet there's a decent proportion of people who've committed a terrible crime.
Well, I mean, you just have to look at smaller crimes, right? Look at smaller crimes. Look at shoplifting. Look at the drug use, right? Look at jaywalking, right? Look, like even something as small as jaywalking, right? If I jaywalked and I decided, okay, shit, I did something terrible. I did something like I decided that what I did was terrible, right? And I went to the cops that I jaywalked. There is a chance that the police and then the district attorney and whatever goes, okay, he admitted to his crime, and we're going to punish him to the full extent that crime.
You're going to be that one outlier.
Right, like the district attorney is up for election, and he has to make a point that he's hard on crime.
He just needs one more to say, I put away 800 criminals last month.
Right. You know, that's all it takes. That's all it takes is to go, okay, we're going to take this minor offense, and then we're going to prosecute it to the full extent that the law allows us to. You have literally no incentive to try to rectify your crimes or rectify whatever is wrong in your psyche that made you commit that crime in the first place. You have no incentive. And let's be honest, everyone. Humans operate on incentive. It's not fear of punishment. It's not.
Yeah,
It's been proven time and time again that humans do not operate on fear of punishment. They operate on incentive.
I'm just going to read this comment here. Og says, here a jaywalker who chose to cross a 45-mile-per-hour 5-lane road at night caused them to be hit by a car, and the police refused to charge the driver as they crossed the street 100 feet from a crosswalk. Yeah, but I'm not surprised. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the interesting things is, one of the things that fascinates me is how people respond to people who commit crimes and are openly stating to be remorseful. Because one of the interesting things is, they are very frequently not believed, right? There's a belief that people will act remorseful, which makes sense. It gets you off the hook. But one of the things that's fascinating is people who say things like, oh, they talk about how terrible they feel and how they're sort of up all night with guilt, but they don't talk about how bad the victims feel and things like that. But people don't think like that with remorse.
Right.
It's wanting people not to be human. Remorse feels bad and makes you behave better because you want the feeling to go away so that you feel better. That's just how humans work. That's what remorse is.
Like here, I'll give you a perfect example. Right? Me, recently, right? I am admitting to a crime right now. Right? So bear with me. I stole a towel from a hotel
fizzy
room.
Lifting drinks.
Well, I've done that thousands of times. No remorse. I stole a towel from a hotel room because I knew I needed more towels at home. Right?
Dun, dun, dun.
Right. Here's the thing. I feel exactly zero remorse for what I've done. Zero. Okay?
You're a monster. Right, but it's one of those abstract-y sort of crimes where you're so separated from the victim that, like...
Exactly, right? And that's what I mean, is that if you would throw me in jail for what I've done, I would not walk out of that jail feeling remorseful towards the corporation that I stole from. I wouldn't. I would feel upset that I got caught. I would feel more angry with myself that I didn't do it in a way.
This gets to the heart of a fascinating article I was reading a few years ago, but it's a little bit of a tone shift because it's about a child abuser.
Okay.
So it gets more serious. But I was reading an article about a Quaker group called Circles of Support and Accountability. And what they do is they provide emotional support and community for sex offenders who come out of prison. And this article was about the guy who founded it. And the guy was a Quaker. Now, the Quakers, I don't normally like religious people. The Quakers are kind of wonderful. The guy was a Quaker, and a different person contacted him. He was a Quaker who worked in a prison.
Before you continue, though, I have to know, what do the Shakers and the Candlestick Makers think about this?
They're not a fan.
All right, go on.
This guy had been... This guy came to see him, and he worked in a prison. He was a Quaker who... I think he was like a prison chaplain, or he did support in prisons. And he was talking to his other Quaker friend on the outside saying, look, I've got this issue. This guy's being released from prison, and he's a child sex abuser. I'll see if I can find the link to this article for you to send you, because I'll forget all these details, but it's really interesting. And what he was saying was he's been in and out of prison his entire life, right? And he
real quick, or Chaos said that's why they get your credit card in advance.
Yeah, but only if they notice you've stolen the towels. That's the only way they get you.
Right, right. That's the only like category of crime that has any sort of leeway in any sort of democratic system of criminal justice is financial crimes. That's it. Like after that, there's no remorse.
Pretty much. So, so he was saying this guy he's been in and out of prison his entire life. Every time he's come out of prison, he's reoffended. Same type of crime, and he's gone back in. And the problem is he has nowhere to live when he comes out. No one will rent him a home.
Yeah.
And that is a very understandable thing. Why would you want to? But this guy took him in, even though he had like kids in his family. He was like, well, it is a point of pride that I believe in compassionate treatment and highly important religious conviction. So he took him in, and he made him essentially a member of his family. He went to live with him in like a little annex apartment, and they had barbecues and things like that. They accepted him completely as a new member of society while keeping an eye on him, and while the local police were basically harassing him because they were 100% sure he would reoffend. And he never did. And you knew that's where the story was going because it ended up forming a thing. And what they do is, when sex offenders come out of prison, they provide them with a social circle where they can be accountable to the social circle and talk to them. But that's not the interesting thing. That whole thing is interesting because it ties into the fact that if you put people in a situation where they have nothing to lose, they have no incentive not to reoffend.
Right.
But what was interesting about it was, this article also talks about this guy's life. And he said... and what was interesting was as a child, he'd lost his family, and he'd gone to live in a series of like orphanages and foster homes, right?
Sure.
And he'd been abused by older kids in those homes sexually, and then he'd repeated that abuse, and he'd never had any kind of therapy, he'd never had any kind of intervention. He'd continued as he'd gotten older, repeating that abuse. And the thing that always stuck with me was at the end, when this article ends, it says, he never did reoffend, but he also never expressed remorse for what he'd done.
Right.
And he died believing that the system had done more harm to him than he had done. Now,
and my question would
that.
Right. Well, my question would be, what's more important? Right? What is more important? That the person who offended admits remorse, or the person who offended never offended again? What is more important? And I would argue that the fact that they never offended again is way more important than them admitting fault.
That is what stuck with me in that article so much. We prioritize remorse hugely, but we don't have a system that actually encourages people to actually engage with what they did in a way that harvests remorse. We have a system that goes, you're a bad person, you should feel like shit. And it's not a process, I don't think, you know?
Well, and it goes even further than that. It's not even a system, at least here in the U.S., like, it's not a system that says, oh, you should feel bad. It's, you should feel bad, and then we're going to make sure that every social outlet that you have, make sure that you know that you've done bad, right? It's, you know, like, okay, like, this is such a sketchy ground to walk on, right?
Odd says, when it comes to abuse, it's not strangers, it's people close to the family far more often. Yes, that's also a very good point.
Yes.
So my start menu full of apps.
Oh, now we know. Now we know. But over here, like recently, in a community not that far away from me, we're talking a matter of 30 miles. There's been continuous news reports and public announcements and some of that about a registered sex offender moving into a community. Okay, and this has been broadcast to anyone who has any presence on social media, right? They know that this person is moving in his community. Now, here's the thing. I don't think that the families who live in this community don't have a right to know. I think they do. I legitimately think that the people who live in this neighborhood have a legitimate reason to know that a registered and prosecuted sex offender is moving to their neighborhood. I do. Because that is a very personal and real thing that they have to be conscious of, right? But I don't think that anyone outside of that community has a legitimate right to know that information. If they come across the information, sure.
I'm curious as to what you would think of the system we have here. So in the US, my understanding is that in most states, there's a sex offenders register, and if you're on it, it's basically public, right? Anyone can kind of search it.
To a point, yes.
Here, we have a sex offenders register, but only the police basically are allowed to access it. But if you are say a parent, you can go to the police and say, is there anyone I'm in contact with or is in my area that I need to be aware of? And they will tell you. Does that make sense? So you can't just Google it. You have to go to the police and say, I live in a house, I have 3 kids, they're this age. Do I have any neighbors I need to be worried about? And they will tell you an amount of information that they have assessed.
And and honestly, here's my thing. I think that that was the intent of the system over here. It just got to the point of laziness.
Right.
Where it was like, okay, we believe that there's people out there who have a right and a reasonable reason to know about what's going on around them. We're tired of addressing these concerns personally.
Yeah. See, my problem with that is, don't get me wrong, because I don't think registers are a bad idea, and I don't think giving access to parents of information on the register is a bad idea. I think when you make that publicly searchable to anybody, you might as well be pinning a bullseye on their back and saying, vigilantes, here's the guy.
And yeah, you know, I kind of agree. I agree that, look, I believe that information about sex offenders and people who could theoretically be a threat to your livelihood, your children, all that, your property even, is something that you have a right to know. But I don't think it should be as easy to access as just typing in a name into a website. Right. There should be...
Or a postcode. And just getting... Here's everybody within a 5-mile radius.
Right.
Because the thing is, there are people
I think that means...
Sorry, Karen.
What you're actually entertaining isn't a person's feeling of security. You're actually entertaining their feeling of curiosity.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because there have been cases of people who were killed by people out of state. Who, you know, I think you should have to demonstrate at the very least that you live in the area.
Yeah.
But it's a difficult thing because it's tricky because nobody wants to be out there advocating for sex offenders.
Sure.
But it is an unusual situation we're in where no other group is in this position where you can't ever say, well, maybe we're mistreating that person.
Well, and the situation is unfortunately, like, no matter what you say or what you do or what your actions are, unless you are the person saying that these people need to die, you can be misconstrued as being supportive.
Yeah, it's very difficult. It's very, and of course the other problem is that these things are only ever sorted out on legal challenges and who's gonna fund that. You know what I mean? Who's gonna pro bono that case? But
Right.
the difficulty is, these things don't just affect the people that the most rabid supporters of these kind of laws think they are affecting. Like, everybody's heard the story of the person who, ends up on a sex offenders register for pissing in the woods. You know what I
Sure.
mean? And then... No, I'm not saying you should be pissing in the woods, but,
Well, I mean, like, recently here, and it took a fight. Like, this wasn't something that was just like, oh, shit, yeah, we should probably differentiate sex offenders, right? Because over here, there was an issue where people who were, like you said, pissing in the woods, pissing on the side of this, on the road, right? Couples where they were 16 and 17, and suddenly someone became 18 and 17. That was marked down as a sex offender, and there was no differentiating degrees, right? So the same person who was abducting and sexually abusing kindergarten children were being put down in the same registry as the guy or the girl who was 17 dating a 16-year-old, and suddenly their birthdays hit, and suddenly it was an 18-year-old and a 17-year-old.
Oh, because yes, some states don't have Romeo and Juliet laws. Yeah.
Right. They were being viewed as the same as according to the registry, right? There was no differentiating between degrees. There was no ability to see the details of the crimes. It was cut and dry.
Yeah. And there's so much hysteria, you can't work through these with people.
Right.
Og says some prison yards separate them to the gangs, etc. So the gangs don't assault and kill them. Yeah, in fact, in Britain there is a common slang term for pedophiles, which is nonce. If you've ever heard nonce, that's what it means. But it's short for... It's a prison term. It's not on normal communal exercise.
Sure.
So, even here...
I mean, sorry. Getting away from the sexual crimes, right?
Yeah, it's been quite a cheery, light show this week.
I mean, that's why we keep Not Biscuits to a very limited thing, because we use Not Biscuits as our means to say the things that you're not supposed to say on YouTube proper.
It's a chance to get into something a little more deep, A
little more gravitas, right?
Something that you don't want Fortnite rolling in the background of.
Right, and you don't want Owen building a castle to this. But no, like, the get away from the sexual crimes is that there is, because of how criminal justice systems are set up, right? That's why there's this stigma about going to prison where, oh, you go to prison, become a better criminal.
Right.
The recidivism rate.
Well, it's like, I know it's partly stigma, and it's part of why prisons suck, but, like, there is a reason why nobody trusts convicts, and convicts can't get jobs, right? Ex-cons. It's not because prison has this really good reputation for people coming out of prison rehabilitated.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's Ouroboros, right, at that point, right? It's the snake eating its own tail.
Right.
You send people away to prison, you remove them from society with the idea that when they were released, they have served their time and they are rehabilitated. But because of everyone's penchant and desire for retribution, like, all people are getting is the punishment, and not the retribution. And then when they get out, that desire for retribution doesn't go away.
And then you've got the other issue, which is like I was saying earlier, people who commit crimes, they tend to be, most frequently, it's people who don't feel like they have anything to lose. That's why the two groups of people that commit, this is not even a cliche, the two groups of people that commit crimes the most are the very poor and the very rich, right? It's a different type of crime, but rich people know they're never going to feel any consequences, so they don't have anything to lose. Poor people have literally nothing to lose.
Right.
So it is kind of a horseshoe of.
Well, I mean, just to word it a different way, is that the richest people experience no consequence, and the poorest, their life is nothing but punishment.
Right. Absolutely.
You know.
But then you send someone away to prison for, say, 10 years, and the court system is expensive. People who go to prison tend to use up a lot of their money buying the kind of things you have to buy in prison, which costs more than it does in the real world. Mm-hmm. A large amount of people are... I found this out recently. I thought it was devastatingly sad. You're not supposed to feel sorry for prisoners, but do you know that a huge amount of prisoners are robbed by their families while they're in prison?
Oh, absolutely.
The people who they leave in charge of their estates almost always steal them. Essentially, it's so frequent because often they come from poor families, right? And then you also imagine you had a job when you went in, right?
Right.
Maybe not a good job, but it was like
it was a job.
Yeah, a manager. Maybe you were a manager. Maybe you were just a painter decorator, or maybe you fixed phones, or any kind of job. Right?
A means to give you what you need to survive.
Right. Not only do you not have that job when you come out in all certainty, but if your job had any kind of training or expertise, and you went in for 10 years, that training's now useless.
Right. Well, it's why I personally believe that it should be illegal to request people to even voluntarily admit to criminal records.
I think that's a good idea.
I don't think that's okay. Well, there's only 4 people watching, and 2 of them are you and me. So I feel safe saying this. Where I work right now, our paper application that every single person has to fill out if they want a job at my facility, has a section where they're supposed to unveil and admit to a criminal record.
Yeah, it's pretty.
They're supposed to write. Yeah, that is ridiculous to me.
Well, what does it mean to go to prison and then be released if you?
Exactly. That you have to then admit
to everyone. Yeah.
Right. If they can continue, if an employer or anyone else has the means to consistently hold your criminal offenses against you, your sentence never ends.
Right.
That's the reality. So Org mentions in the chat, right, about 420, that for those who, I imagine most people know what 420 means, but if you don't, we're referring to marijuana. That's become a very interesting topic in this country, in my country in particular, because we've now reached a point where things are unequal, right? There was a point in time where crimes on a state level as opposed to a federal level were kind of viewed with equal severity.
I just want to address something else Alex said in the chat just before, because it's just something we were talking about a second ago. Alex says, John, aren't we supposed to keep sex offenders away from kids so they can't be hired by schools? I think that's a different thing, because legally and procedurally, that's a very specific type of offense that is prohibited from working with kids. In that case, you'd have to say, on the application, like
Right.
you'd have to declare that. But not. I
Right,
think
because
what John
we're
means
talking
is
about a very
more like,
specific situation, right?
yeah, I think you're talking about more like if you go to McDonald's, do they have a right to know
Exactly.
that you were once in jail for getting in a fight outside a bar?
The crime has to be related to the work, right? It's like, okay, if someone was a sex offender and they were specifically a sex offender because they were sexually assaulting or raping or whatever minors, children, kindergarten age, whatever, right? And then that person wants to become a kindergarten teacher. Yes, in that specific situation, the employer has a right and a reasonable reason to know what this person's history is all about, right?
Right.
Because even if you have the best therapeutic, rehabilitative system in the world, there's always the 0.01% or whatever of the person who is just fundamentally flawed in their head, and they are going to commit that crime again.
Well, for me,
right?
it's about a slight difference between being on a register and having a criminal record, right? Because
sure,
if
but
you
what,
have a criminal,
what I'm saying, okay, if what I'm trying to eventually get to, right, before I forget this point, I'm not trying to cut you off. I will forget this point. If the person's crime is stealing tasteless bullshit burgers, then yes, McDonald's has a right to know that this person has a criminal record directly related to their business, right? Absolutely. But if the crime is sexual assault, as long as it's not jizzing on a burger patty, McDonald's doesn't have a reason to know because it doesn't affect their business.
Well, I would say you've got what you have is like a legal exemption, which is you go, it's illegal for businesses to ask about criminal records, except schools that want to ask about sexual offenses. Do you know what I mean? You build in that kind of exemption.
Right. If the crime can somehow affect the business's ability to operate, they have a right to know.
But what if
the crime can affect the person who is supposed to benefit from the organization, they have a right to know.
See, this is why I think a better system is to build parole officer type roles but as a more supportive role and then what you do is you make the disclosure at the discretion of the parole officer, but you make the role of the parole officer to still be your advocate. That make sense?
Orcas says safety of their employees, they often run skeleton crews. Well, okay, when we're talking about skeleton crews, then we are moving the discussion away from criminal justice to economics.
Yeah, we're also moving away from like a broad general principle to highly specific.
Right. I mean, I don't think you're wrong, right? I think as being someone who has been directly affected by the idea of a skeleton crew, trying to manage a skeleton crew, trying to make sure that a skeleton crew doesn't exist, I understand. Like, you don't want to put yourself in a position where a personal reason or a criminal reason or some other extenuating circumstance will put you in that position of being short-staffed.
For me,
I get that. I do get that, where it's like you want to avoid that happening. So you try to hedge your bets, right? You try to put yourself in a position where none of your employees are the type of people who could be removed from service because of personal disposition, criminal record,
right.
whatever. I get that.
For me, it's kind of almost like a legal principle, which is, why, once you've been to prison for one crime, arrested, gone to trial, convicted, and then released, do you then forever lose presumption of innocence on committing further crimes?
Right. Yeah, it's a weird thing
seems
where
to be creating more reoffenders.
It comes down to essential but a lack of understanding of the human brain, right? Where most people will believe that if a person has the ability to commit one crime, they also have a predisposition and a more likely ability to commit other crimes. And that's absolutely not the case, right? Where you look at like an arsonist, right? You look at someone who has some sort of mental flaw where they like to see things burn down, right? They like to see things on fire. What you're suggesting is that same person has a predisposition to rape. And that's not the case. That's absolutely not the case. But that's generally how employers view criminals. Where if someone is convicted of a sex offense,
or it's like
a business who handles money will see that person and say that they have a predisposition to steal.
Well, it's a little bit like
that's how that works.
It's people who see. You see it a lot with kids who were raised in gang violence. People don't understand that very often people who were raised in gang environments have no predisposition to the behavior that got them sent to prison once separated from the gang. It's a very contextual set of crimes. You know what I mean?
And the thing is that try to wing this back around to the debate.
Good luck.
Yeah. When we're talking about race, a person who is convicted and arrested and sent to jail for a crime attributed to a gang is not more likely to commit than a white-collar crime.
Right.
But that is the assertion that conservatives like to make. Right? It's the idea that all crimes are equal and that they should be held at the same gravitas. And that's not the truth, because most white-collar crimes have far more victims than the victims of gang violence or gang crime. Not to diminish the effect of the crime, right? If you are the family of someone who member of the family is killed in a drive-by or gang violence, yes, the effect is immediate, it's devastating, and it's horrible, right? There's no diminishing that, right? It's terrible, and you have my sympathy, and you should have the sympathy of any rational thinking human being. I'm not saying that that's not the case. What I'm saying is that if you are, excuse me, if you are the victim of a crime committed by a white-collar criminal who has gamed the system, has affected the economics of an area, who has, by their decision and their actions, have made it more difficult for someone to find prosperity or advancement, right? You are now among a larger group.
Right.
Plain and simple.
And then you get the other metric, which is white collar criminals as a class are far less likely themselves to have been victims of crime, whereas working class criminals are far more likely to be in an environment saturated with crime and have been victims themselves, which I think is a massively complicating factor.
Right, or have viewed those types of crimes as a norm.
Right. Like, how do you, as a moral judgment, send someone to jail for 10 years? Like, this is something I've been thinking about recently. Let's say you have someone who, every day of their life, they got the shit kicked out of them. And then one day, for 100 days in a row, and then one day they got fed up and they kicked the shit out of someone else, and they got arrested and they went to jail for, I don't know, 6 months.
Right, and it happens.
It does happen, but what's the moral balance there? Yes, they went to jail for the sentence of their crime, but in attempting to impose a kind of justice on the universe, that person hasn't been participating in a just system. I'm not even saying the person they beat up is responsible for beating them up, right? They committed the crime.
Right.
They beat up a completely innocent person, but no sort of human enforced karma has taken place. You know, that guy's still down 100 beatings. You know what I mean?
So here's this actually gets to the core of the problem with racial injustice in, like, the U.S., right? This was a part of the debate, right? Where you have a group of people, right, who are committing essentially crimes and performing actions that are deemed immoral, but because of the uniform they wear and the badge that they pin to that uniform, suddenly it's okay, right? So think of it this way, right? Like you said, a person who has been beaten 100 days in a row, they've been beaten, and finally they say, fuck this, I'm not taking this anymore, and they kneel on their bully's throat, right? They go, fuck this, I'm going to kneel on my bully's throat for as long as it takes for them to suffocate and die. You don't view that person as a hero. You don't view them as just. You don't view them as doing their duty, right? Because they're not wearing a badge.
Right.
They're not wearing a uniform, right? There's this idea that because of the position that a person holds allows them to perform actions that you would not allow another person to perform, makes them just. And let's be real, that's not the case.
Yeah, it's complicated. Alex says, here's something I need to make obvious. Even if I agree with you sometimes, if I feel you're ignoring a bigger issue or otherwise straight up biased in its main forms, I'll bring up the other valid side. Oh, sure.
Yeah. By all means. Like, look, I think me and Owen kind of fall into a similar group, right? I will say that me and Owen have differences. we have expressed our differences on stream, recordable. You can look back and see them. And a lot of times our differences comes down to rights of persons acting under a business as opposed to people acting as individuals. We have differences, right? Me and Owen absolutely have differences politically and philosophically. I don't think either of us would be willing to say 100% that what we believe is the universal truth or a universal right.
Well, I'm sure there is such a thing.
Yeah, then there's no one who can determine that.
Right.
But me and Owen both act under what we believe is right, considering the circumstances and the situation. And how we interpret those situations will be our differences. But I think ultimately we agree on situations where it determines someone's life, like literally their ability to live.
I would say we save our most vicious arguments for things that are completely meaningless.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know why this sticks out of my head, but we had, I think, one of our most vicious. I say that with a question because I don't even know how to. I think we had one of our most fervent and emotional
I think
arguments.
I know which one you're going for here. Carry on.
I'm not talking about magic. I
don't think so.
It involves
are you talking
advertisements
the
in a
billboard
park.
advertising? Yeah.
Yeah. We had an argument about advertisements in a park. And there is a Those Aren't Biscuits episode. I don't know if it's recorded on YouTube or if it's hidden away in a Libsyn archive.
It was pre-YouTube, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I remember the positions we took. It was whether or not someone who has to look at an advert should have some say over whether an advert is there, even if they don't own the property where the advert is displayed.
Right. And me and Owen took very different opinions on that. And I mean, it's not even worth getting into right now, but to speak to the point, to speak to the question at hand is that no, we don't ignore dissenting opinions because Owen and I often, I wouldn't say often, but we do regularly have dissenting opinions. And I believe there is merit to listening to a dissenting opinion. And if you are able to formulate a well thought out, cited, evidence-based opinion against that dissenting opinion, that's valid.
There's some merit to finding out you're wrong.
I'm gonna mute myself again for a second.
Well, actually, I kind of gotta go. It's like 5:30 in the morning for me. I need to get some sleep. So I'm guessing John's muting himself because he has to mute himself. But I'm actually gonna wrap up. So if anybody's still watching this, I'll wait for John to get back so I can say goodbye. But I'm gonna go to sleep soon, you guys. I don't know how long ago the stream actually ended with the debate. It was a long time ago. And we chatted. We've been going for 3.5 hours talking about criminal justice and things. It was a weird conversation. So in many ways, it was a proper Those Aren't Biscuits episode for you all. I'm just rambling.
I'm back.
Hi, John. What I was saying was that I have to go to sleep anyway.
Yeah, I know. Okay, so before you go,
okay,
right?
Cool.
All right. I'm going to propose something. All right. If you don't want to do this, that's fine. I understand you're sleepy, you're tired, you want to go sleep. All right. But I have one suggestion. Okay. We should, because I think we both have YouTube up still, right?
Uh-huh.
We should, at least for a few minutes, check out one of the major news outlets' coverage and see what they're saying right now.
All right. Do you want me to do it so that we can stream it?
Yeah, like, okay, so I imagine CBS, right? That's what or let's just agree on one. You know what? Let's be weird, right? Let's look and see what Fox News.
I got CBS News, but I could probably do Fox News.
Let's see what they're saying about the
Let me see if I can get
debate.
that up live. Does Fox News have a live stream on YouTube? Because
I don't know if they're live, but I searched Fox News debate, and
Fox
the
News
first
expert panel on key moments from the final presidential
that's
debate.
what I got.
Panel is standing by with analysis. Chris
So
Wallace,
let's count down.
Dana Perino,
Let's count down from 3, and we'll both click on
Brazil and Carl
Hold on
Rove.
just a second.
Chris Wallace, your thoughts?
All right, go. Count down from 3.
All right, 3, 2, 1, click.
Panel is standing by with analysis. Chris Wallace, Britt Hume, Dana Perino, Juan Williams, Katie Pavlich, Donna
Trump,
Brazil, and
I am
Carl
not a crook.
Rove. Chris Wallace, your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I'm jealous. I would have liked to have been able to moderate that debate and to get a real exchange
Fair enough,
of
Chris
views
Wallace.
Instead of,
I
hundreds
have
of interruptions.
more respect
I thought it
for
was
Chris
a good debate, a good
Wallace
substantive
nowadays than I
debate,
used
two
to.
very competing
I have more respect for him than
visions
anybody
for the
else on
country.
Fox.
I thought that Biden
absolutely.
had many more specific plans, whether it came to how to handle the COVID, whether it came to how to handle climate change, whether it came to how to handle health care. I thought
he is the last
he was
true
more fluid. There were
journalist who
clearly
is
times
employed by Fox.
when Joe Biden seemed to falter a little bit in making his point or finishing his sentence. I thought, honestly, and this may speak a little bit to Martha, that the topics and the questions played more to Biden's advantage than they did to the president's. That may be a matter of opinion, but
I would agree with that as well. I think that
Biden could play offense
well
and the president was forced on the defense. I was
right, and that's the problem, is that there's no question that exists that plays better
Biden was
Trump.
very successful in kind of countering it by immediately throwing the president on defense about his China bank account, and then especially on his failure to turn over his tax returns during his 4 years. And the president got quite defensive about that. In terms of sort of the key clips, moments, I thought that you're exactly right. The president talked a lot about, you've had all these years in Washington, why haven't you done it? You're a typical politician, all talk, no action. For Joe Biden, I thought that his best exchange was when the president said, I'm the least racist person in this room. And Joe Biden said, Abraham Lincoln over here is the most racist president we've ever had. And he's got a dog whistle as big as a foghorn. But as I say, I think a good substantive debate, and both sides will find plenty to
at that point, you and I are both have just checked out.
Yeah, several interesting moments. I want to bring Britt into the conversation here. One that I thought landed well from President Trump was when he said, you're the reason I ran. You and Barack Obama and your administration are the reason that I decided to run.
Thanks, Obama.
Your thoughts on what we just saw, Britt, tonight?
Well, first off, I thought the moderator did a very good job, and she did at least bring up the subject of this story that is broken on us in the last 10 days or so, and which was much added to today. I'm not sure that the exchange on that was altogether satisfactory. We still do not have, from Biden or the Biden camp, an outright denial of what has now become the issue, which is not only the behavior and the business dealings of his son, but also possibly of the former vice president himself. Having said that, I think it's also worth noting, as you all did, that the mute button, so far as I know, was never used, which was a good thing. I thought that Trump gave his best debate performance perhaps ever, but I think the former vice president, fought him to at least a draw. And
his
I think
best performance ever. You know what? Here's the thing. I think he's had some pretty good debates against the likes of Jeb Bush.
Did you hear what he said after that, though?
And Biden was probably at his most effective when he was talking about the country's craving for
but Biden was
character
able to
and
bring it to
so
a draw,
on, which reflects on the president and what a lot of people don't like about him. All in all, a very good debate, well moderated, not perfectly, but well. Biden held up well. I think Chris is right that he did falter at times, as happens with him, but it wasn't
that's
bad.
damning
He didn't have a
to
really
say
bad
that
moment where likely to make people say, "Oh,
the moderation
what's
isn't
the problem there?"
preferable.
So I think that all in all, he does fine. I don't know that this debate will change the shape of the race. I think probably not.
Yeah, Dana, that's, I guess, the real big question this close to the election is how much does it fundamentally change the electorate, especially in these key battleground states?
I was just noting that at 11:30 this morning, I was on with Sandra Smith, and I mentioned that 42 million people had voted. By the time we got on air tonight, it was nearly 50 million people had already voted. So this thing is moving very quickly. It's already underway. Whereas the first debate was sort of like whitewater rafting blindfolded, this one was more like being on the lazy river and not even spilling my drink. I thought that it was good for both candidates, that they were they benefited from the 2-minute rule, being able to make their points. And I also think that, whereas in the first debate,
even Fox
Joe
News
Biden
thinks he's a
cleared
pain
the
in the
very
ass
low
when
bar
he's
that had been
interrupting.
set for him.
Yeah.
The bar for President
So here's
Trump in
the
this debate
thing,
was
right?
set very high.
And I don't know if this is beneficial to Biden or
I think
not,
that he
but
acquitted himself
the
very well
news
in this
outlets
in terms
who
of allowing Vice President Biden
lean more
to
liberal
run out of steam in
will
his
probably
answers,
say
not
that
interrupt
Biden
him. I don't
did
think that a lot of the
amazing
policy
in this
details were
debate.
there for the Biden team.
Right?
And
And I don't even know. I don't even necessarily think he
campaign
did.
because they feel like they just can't ever find a way to nail him down on a couple of specifics.
News.
But I think that the ultimate winner
even
tonight
they
is
are
the
saying
viewer,
that,
the
it's
American people
kind
who
of an
tuned
even
in,
draw.
because you really were able to get a measure of both people. There's very different visions for the country coming from these two candidates.
Juan Williams, your thoughts? There were a lot of culture questions. Kristen Welker asked about the talk.
You're a black man. Tell us about the cultural
families of color
questions.
give to their children about being pulled over. A lot of discussion along those lines. What did you think tonight as we watch the Trump family exiting the building now?
Well, on that point, I mean, when Mrs. Trump came on the stage tonight, she clearly had a mask on. And I think that said something about not only the enforcement of rules around here, but apparently a little change in attitude about what the Trump team thinks the American people want to see at this point. But to your question, Martha, we had in this debate mentions of Adolf Hitler and Abraham Lincoln. And clearly what you saw from Vice President Biden was the suggestion that Donald Trump is not the least racist man in the history, least racist president in the history of the United States, but a man who's called the Black Lives Matter movement terrorist and gone on about NFL players protesting as deserving to be fired. And I didn't think when President Trump responded in terms of saying, well, I lowered this unemployment rate, I did this and that, and you put more people in jail, I thought Vice President Biden stepped up to the plate by saying he had made a mistake. And then the counter from President Trump was to say, well, you've been in office. This is what Brett Baer was picking up. You've been in office. You've been around. You had your chance. And there came Vice President Biden again, coming back, I thought, pretty strongly to say, we did make improvements. We got 37,000 people out of jail. We granted clemency to 1,000 people. We looked for pattern and practices in terms of police abuse that would somehow clear up the difficult relationships between the police and the black community.
Watching, so they can tell the truth.
But I think that, my
right,
colleagues are right on target in saying it was a good debate.
Okay, we
I don't
can
think
get away with
it moved
this
the
for a
needle
little
in terms
bit,
of the
right?
few undecided voters.
We have exactly 2 hours.
Sort of conservative.
He's very sleepy right
at the
now.
moment. What I saw was that, Vice President Biden said, I'm not the one that made it. He flat out said, not a penny. Not a penny, and put President Trump on his heels by saying, well, release your taxes. You're
but no, this has been an interesting thing leading up to this election is...
Yeah, a couple of points, Juan. One was we did hear that the U.S. had a good relationship with Hitler at the beginning.
Okay, I'm going to I'm skipping now.
Studying
I'm back
history,
in.
I don't think that that's the case.
David
but,
Hasselhoff's talking again.
We also
Yes,
heard
that's what I
that
got.
at the reason that they didn't get a prison reform bill done in the Obama-Biden years, was because of a Republican Congress. And President Trump responded, well, I had to work with a Democratic Congress. And so you get it done, and I got it done. So that was an effective point on his part.
No.
Katie Pavlich, your thoughts on that?
Please say you agree.
Well, I think the beginning of the debate and the end of the debate were the most important for these reasons. COVID-19 and the economy are at the top of the list when it comes to what voters are looking at candidates for, what their plans are. President Trump on COVID-19 talked in a hopeful way about a vaccine, about moving the country forward in a balanced way to deal with the virus, but also to keep the country open.
Okay, so let's be clear. Whoever's watching our stream,
shut down the country
is that the
again,
guy,
schools, to tell businesses
young
they
David
cannot no
Hasselhoff,
longer
asked
operate,
specifically
if he becomes president. That's a big deal for a lot
about
of
a criminal
Americans, especially when they're
justice
trying to get back to
issue.
work and haven't
The
had
person
income
he
for a number
asked
of
to
months, and while
speak
small
for
businesses are going
Trump
under. On the economy at the end,
is
I
now
think
talking
Joe
about
Biden did a
COVID-19.
terrible job of
They are,
explaining his environmental policy when it comes to fracking
me and Owen are not a
energy
news
in places
outlet.
like Pennsylvania, which he is
All right.
still
They're
trying to
filibustering
win. He's
their own
losing ground in
piece.
Pennsylvania.
Right.
There are voters there
But
who
we are
paying close attention
legitimately
to both
watching
the
Fox
economic plans
News.
of both of these candidates.
We have
Joe
chosen
Biden did
Fox
a terrible
News,
job of defending fracking.
and they are specifically avoiding
He
the
said in
question
March 2020 of this
from
year
their own
that he
commentators.
absolutely wanted to ban fracking. So he's changed on that and was not clear.
And now they're talking about
frack
frack
for
mining.
the workers that he is trying to gain.
We've gone from
back
COVID-19
votes that Trump won
to
in 2016.
frack mining.
Yeah, Donna,
To a
the
question
president said he wanted
about
to,
criminal
Joe Biden,
justice.
rather, the former vice president said he wanted to transition away
Right.
from
I'm
over
not,
time. And the President Trump said, I hope
adding
they're listening
influence to this.
in Texas
This is legitimately
and
what
in
just happened.
Pennsylvania and in Oklahoma. Your thoughts on that and overall for the evening?
Well, I also hope they're listening on the Gulf Coast, where, of course, we've been dealing with a lot of historic storms, because that is what climate change is. And I hope they're listening on the West Coast, because we're dealing with historic fires, and that is also climate change. So, yes, we need a transition, but I want to make 3 points, and I hope I can make them quickly. This was not the Twitter Donald Trump. Okay, amen. We don't get to be, laughed at or mocked or assaulted with his somewhat demeaning, demoralizing tweets. The tone was different, but it was still the Donald Trump that refuses to release his taxes, once again claiming that he has an audit. What are you hiding? Joe Biden, I thought, made a good point. The second thing is he said, I have a health care plan.
Okay.
But where is it? It's been 10 years
on the
since the
reverse
Republicans
side,
said,
we now have a
don't like
commentator
what
who
you've
is
done,
clearly
but you haven't given us
pro-Biden,
nothing
who,
lately.
instead
And
of
I
talking
think the most
about
important thing is that Joe
what the
Biden,
question
when he
was
says,
about climate
"I can't
change
get it
is
through
talking about
Congress,"
tax
well, that's
returns.
gridlock. Whether you're a Republican president or a Democratic president, the American people are tired of gridlock. We had an immigration bill back when Karl Rove and Dana was under the Bush administration. We had one under the Obama administration. We couldn't get the deal.
Yeah.
So, yes,
she makes a legitimate point, though, right, about gridlock.
President
right?
Trump
the way
was
the
not
American
capable of
system is set
for all
up,
Americans. I'll make one last point.
Unfortunately,
As far as
are
I'm
vulnerable
concerned,
to the idea
Lyndon
of
Johnson
gridlock,
has been my
where
best
you have
president. Why? Because he passed the Civil
president
Rights Act,
of one
because
party
he passed the Voting Rights Act, because he made
and
this a more
Congress
perfect
of
union
another
with the
party,
Fair Housing
and
Act.
then
He's been the best president,
judicial system,
in my judgment, for all Americans,
Supreme
not
Court
just
of another
Black
party.
Americans.
It's still weird to me that the
When-
president's almost like kind of a separate election. Oh, rolling on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Like here, the prime minister is obviously chosen by the party that gets the most votes, right? That's basically how they do it. So it's weird to me that you can have a president, basically, you can have a president of a minority government pretty easily, right? Like that's doable, right? Just an interesting difference,
Yeah. Well, I mean, like the issue here is, so everyone likes to believe that there is 3 branches of the government, right? There is a judicial branch, there is a legislative branch, and the executive branch, and they all have defined roles that they fill. But as we've entered into the more modern era of politics, those roles have become blurred. They have become indefinable.
Right, and so the difficulty is that the separation between the executive and the legislative branch is now a shock coming not an advantage, because the president, and this is, I think, true of either side, the president is no longer capable of being a non-partisan figure.
Right. Or a defining figure.
Right.
Like, on the opposite side is that a president can no longer be a figurehead for an ideology.
Right.
But on the weird outlier of this is the judicial branch, which often becomes an extension of the executive branch.
Because it's one of the few things the president can just do.
Right. But here's the weird thing is because if members of the judicial branch are stubborn, right? Like we've seen this recently, right? With RGB, right? Ruth Bader Ginsburg, with all due respect to her and her supporters and some of that, speaking to her as a human, should have retired 10 years ago.
I'm going to have to interrupt you, though. I do have to go to sleep.
Okay. But yeah, she should have retired 10 years ago. But she hung on out of purpose.
Yeah.
Interesting. But yeah. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed our coverage of this debate. I intend to stream election night.
That was my plan.
I don't know if Owen intends to join me, but I will for sure be streaming election night, which is November 3rd. So please tune in and we'll talk about things that are going on. We will enjoy either a new reign in America or welcome in the end of times. We'll do that together. I don't know if Owen intends to join me or not.
That's my plan.
But that's the plan. But once again, thank you for watching. This has been an episode of Those Are Biscuits. I have been Jonathan Kadai. You can find me here, or you can follow me on Twitter, which is at John C. Person, or you can check out majorspoilers.com, where I write reviews for comics and I write a feature trying to introduce new readers to comics. That sounds clunky, but that's what I do. And where can they find you, man?
Just here also. And that'll be... All right. Bye, guys.
Yep. Have a good one.